Hi, I'd like to call this meeting of the Willits City Council, May 10th, to order. And I think we want to add something to the agenda.
We do. We have an off-agenda item that is a letter of opposition regarding HCD, Housing and Community Development's proposed cuts to the CDBG program. And so if the council approves adding this to the agenda, we'll take it up as item 8B.
This is the one to Senator McGuire.
Yes.
We all move approval.
Second, okay, motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye? All right. All right, well, let's have our police chief lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Kathy.
Councilmember Rodriguez. Present. Strong. Present. Orenstein.
Here.
Yes, I'm here.
Mayor Gonzalez.
Here. And one of the things we want to do is take a couple of things out of order. Before we do that, under public communications, I think, Adrian, could you introduce somebody?
I would be happy to. I would like to introduce and invite Georgianne Krosky to come up to the podium. Many of you may already know that Georgianne was appointed yesterday by the governor to the 3rd District Supervisor's seat. And so we have representation once again after too long of an absence. And we just want to say congratulations to you and wish you the best. And we are looking forward to being strong partners with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm very excited. So, really what I'm trying to focus on first is learning the job and hearing what people have to say. So I'll be scheduling as many meet and greets and, sessions for people to come and talk to me and tell me some of their concerns and some of the things they felt have been overlooked. So I will be around.
Congratulations.
Good. Thank you very much.
All right. Public communication. The council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone may be given an opportunity to be heard. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, whenever any group of persons wishes to address the council on the same subject matter, the mayor may request that a spokesperson be chosen by the group. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the city council which are not on the posted agenda. Public criticism of the city council, commissions, boards, and agencies will not be prohibited. However, no action shall be taken. Would anybody like to address? Okay, I'll recognize Jim. All right. You can step forward and state your name.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez and Council. This is Jim Merrill, and I'm here with my Food Policy Council hat on today. Last year, I gave the Council legislative trackers regarding who's doing what, how they're voting on agricultural and issues in the state. And so I wanted to give you this again, and you can peruse it at your leisure. I'll give it to clerk.
Just throw it on the floor.
All right, thank you, Jim.
And so also to tell you that the Food Policy Council has been focusing on a couple different things this last year. One is the sweetened beverage issues, taxes, and also land use in general, and in particular, obviously, cannabis versus food production. So just wanted to let you know that those two issues are continuing, and we'll keep you posted. And there's a report that the Food Policy Council will be giving to the jurisdictions around the county pretty soon. So they'll include updates on all those things. But I did want to give you that information so you could take a look at it.
So there'll be a
There'll be a Food Policy
agendized
Council.
item?
Yes, there will be.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that date isn't set yet, but it'll be soon. So thank you for your time.
All right.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Plaza?
Yes, my name is Barbara Plaza. I'm really concerned about the mediation that Adrian and I were supposed to set up regarding SHN. And then I asked for an extension for a hardship. I'm a disabled woman. I'm going to be kicked on the street and be homeless because you wouldn't mediate with me. And when Priscilla asked if we can get an extension to August 1st, Lance said no. This is regarding abatement over pigs in my yard from a surveillance camera. I'm a disabled woman, I'm gonna be put on the street being homeless. I'm asking the council, do they know what's going on between Adrian and my homelessness? I own a piece of land and I'm gonna be homeless in the end of this month when Judge King comes back, retired Judge King comes back. I'm asking that there would be a little bit of looking into this here. An abatement over pigs and complaints given to John Sherman. And instead of the complaints, the complainers being looked into, I'm being abated over those complaints through a city council hearing, administrative hearing with retired Judge King. How can that be a conflict of interest when it's a conflict when he was even hearing this here? I wish that the council would look into this here. Give me an extension, let me build my house.
Okay, is there anybody else from the public that would like to come up and speak? Okay, I think we're on item 3, and I'm going to take item B first. Presentation by Moss, Levy, and Hartstein regarding audited financial statements for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016. This is your item, Susie?
Yeah. So we have our audit back, and we have our acting program manager here. His name is Ben Zing, and he's with Moss, Levy, and Hartstein. And I just first want to say how great it has been to work with them. They've done a thorough audit. They started from scratch because what we had was 10 years of a previous auditor, so going to a new one and just going through everything has been educational for both of us. So I'd like to invite them to come up and discuss the audit that they.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Ben with Moss, Levy, and Hartstein, as Susie said, and I'm here to present the results of the fiscal year 15-16 audit, and also to present some key financial highlights for the fiscal year. So, before I start, I just want to mention if there's any specific questions that you may have on the note disclosures or the supplemental information or numbers from the audit, I think it would be better if you field them to us at a later time so we can do the research and give you a more detailed answer. But if there's a quick question, feel free to ask at any time. And just a comment about the report date. So the date that we date the reports is the last date that we receive pertinent audit information. So that's not necessarily the date that we provided the city with a final draft. So I have been working with Susie up until probably as late last week, to iron out some of the changes, because it is our first year, so our report format's a little different than what she's used to, so we've just been going back and forth, so that date does not reflect the date that we provide a final draft.
Before you go on, I'd like to take you up on your offer, because I do have a question that if you don't have the answer right now, at least make a note of it.
Okay, yeah.
On page 5 of, I'm not sure, well, I guess it's page 5. You have a table with government activities comparing 2015 to 2016.
Correct.
And down at the bottom, you have a total net position of let's call it 1.6 million for 2016 and 652,000 for 2015. And then in the paragraph below that, you say that the city's governmental net position amounted to $1.6 million as of June 30, 2016, a decrease of $286,000 over 2015. but it looks like it's like $1 million
Keep going.
more.
But keep reading that sentence.
Not counted, not including prior period adjustments.
There you go.
So that, yeah, there were prior period adjustments that we needed to make, and I will get to some, I'll get to the major ones, at
Okay,
the end of my
but
presentation.
what I guess what I'm getting at, I mean, you know, this is like the 10th time I've looked at one of these things.
Yeah.
And I'm a numbers wonk. If they don't look right, you know, it just sets off an alarm bell. So are you saying that the 2016 governmental activities already included the prior period adjustments?
The ending net position includes the prior period adjustment, and the number that I'm talking about is not including, just from operations. So prior period adjustments are kind of, they're restatements of your beginning year balances, so that doesn't get taken into account for the current year changes.
Okay.
Yeah, and those are just summary tables. If you go to the actual financial statements in the back, or in the front, but behind that MD&A, it'll give you more detailed information.
This will
This
be a
is just a
little bit
summary.
easier to read than on this little sucker.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you have any other questions after you take a look at that, you know, we'll take care of you. So let me start by saying that the opinion we gave on the audit was unmodified, which is the highest opinion that auditors can give a financial statement. On the government-wide side, governmental activities, the assets exceeded the liabilities by approximately 1.6 million, as we've already brought up. That's a decrease of $271,000 over the prior fiscal year, not taking into account prior period adjustments. This decrease was primarily caused by the increase in net pension liabilities and not necessarily due to operations. So operations are largely the same as in prior fiscal years. It's just that net pension liabilities went up, and we'll cover that later also, that increase. For business type activities, so this is your 4 enterprise funds, includes water and wastewater, which are major, and then 2 non-major enterprise funds. Assets exceeded liabilities by approximately $25 million. That's an increase of about $7,000 from prior fiscal year. So pretty much unchanged, again, not taking prior period adjustments into account. And again, there would have been a larger surplus if not for the increase in net pension liabilities. We only had one significant deficiency that we encountered during our audit, and that was regarding the lack of control over credit cards. So there was a lack of documentation for some of the credit card receipts that we had reviewed, but this point has already been addressed by the city. I believe new policies are already in place. So that was the only deficiency we found during the audit.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
Were those small amounts on the?
Yeah, there were small amounts. So not every audit firm looks into as much detail as we do regarding these matters, but we like to make sure that any receipts for meals have detailed receipts attached, just to see that there were no alcoholic beverages purchased or excessive tips, anything of that nature. So these were, I believe, 2 to 3 small receipts that had either been missing receipts or didn't have the detailed receipt attached. And when we brought that up to Susie's attention, I believe they went ahead and implemented a new credit card policy where you basically promise to provide those, or the employee won't be reimbursed for those costs. Moving on, general fund balance increased about $150,000 in the current year to $2.5 million, with a majority of that being unrestricted. That is a good amount for a city of Willits' size, and the increase is largely due to good budgeting in keeping costs low compared to the fixed revenue. I mean, revenue in the general fund is largely fixed, so the increase is just due to good cost-cutting measures or cost control measures. The general fund reserve percentage is 58% in the current fiscal year. That's very healthy compared to similar governmental units. And that just basically means that the unreserved fund balance divided by current year's expenditures is 58%. So theoretically, you can operate for more than half the year on reserves alone. So it's a pretty healthy percentage. But due to the size of the city, it's monetarily, it's not a very large amount, so it's still need to be careful with those reserves. So we'll move on next to the enterprise fund. Sewer enterprise fund unrestricted net position decreased about $1.1 million. Half of this decrease comes from increases in the net pension liability, which we'll go over later, and the other half comes simply from falling revenues and increases in operation costs. The sewer fund operated at a loss in the prior fiscal year as well, but it's gotten worse in the current year. The water fund unrestricted net position, on the other hand, increased by about $1.1 million. So this gain came from rising revenues and lowering costs as compared to the prior fiscal year. A portion of this decreased cost comes from changes in the allocation of the net pension liability percentage. So a larger percentage of the net pension liability had been allocated to this fund by the prior auditors, and in going back and reviewing the methodology that they used, we determined that it was not to our standard, so we changed the allocation in reducing the percentage to the water fund. So that caused part of the large increase in net assets. And so that's a one-time thing, it won't be repeated in the next year. And so it appears that water rates more than cover the cost of operation, and especially taking into consideration the lack of debt service interest payment in that fund. I believe it's a 0% interest debt. One fund had a deficit fund balance beside the successor agency, and that fund was a solid waste fund. And the negative fund balance was due to the landfill closure cost, which is a liability item that's accounted for in that fund. And that will be accommodated for in future fiscal years. So it's just that they're showing a one-time liability, a long-term liability in that fund, and revenues will be used in future years to make up that cost.
Ben, if you're looking at a particular page, can you just keep us apprised of which page?
Oh, I'm not,
No?
yeah, I don't, these aren't specific to individual pages, so I probably should have done
I'm just
that.
gonna have to read the whole thing.
Okay, just.
Yeah, so tonight, read the whole thing, and then, let me know about any questions you may have.
He's currently talking mostly pages 20 through 22. Is that-
Yeah, I'm moving from the front to back. That's usually how the financial statement is structured.
Yeah.
They look at the city as a whole, and then kind of it gets smaller and smaller, or more and more detail as the statement goes on. So the other fund with a large deficit fund balance is the successor agency. That's because the successor agency is the former RDA. They issue debt, but there's no assets to offset those debt, and the funds to pay for those long-term debt are going to come from tax increment in future years. So that's why it has a large liability. And that's actually fortunate because now it's not going to be part of the city's books ever since the closure of RDAs. So the state they'll provide the money for those debt payments. So it's not combined with the city's financials any longer. It's what we consider a private purpose agency fund, which is not controlled by the city, but overseen by the city. So now let's go over the increase in net pension liability. So GASB 68 and 71 were implemented in the prior fiscal year, and that basically brings the idea of a net pension liability onto the financial statements themselves. So prior to GASB 68 and 71, the city never showed the net pension for all pension costs. So what GASB 68 and 71 introduced is it brought governmental accounting standards closer to what private business uses, where they have to present the full liability for all future pension costs. So how they figure out the net pension liability number is the actuaries determine how much money it's going to cost to provide future benefits for all the retired employees and current employees, and they subtract from that all the assets that the city has already contributed into that pension plan, and then that's how they determine the net pension liability. It's basically an actuarially determined amount that the city would need to put away now in order to fulfill pension payments in the future. But like I said, it's actuarially determined, so based on how the stock market actually does, and you know, whether retirees pass away early, they live longer than expected, these numbers can change. So in the current fiscal year, this is the second year of implementation. So in the current fiscal year, the total net pension liability of the city is approximately $7 million, with 4 of that coming from the miscellaneous employee plan, pool plan, and then three of it from the safety plan. So safety is for police officers, the miscellaneous is for all other city employees. And that number increased about $1 million from the prior fiscal year. So it was $6 million, and now it's $7 million. So that increase caused all those negative changes that we had talked about in the beginning in governmental activities and in both the enterprise plans.
So that looks like a scary number. And it sounds like we're gonna have to write a check for $7 million next month.
No, it's
That's not the case.
It's not the case, and
So I guess, well, where I'm going with this and with, I'm looking at page 39, which is the long-term liabilities, and I think that's the table you're referring to. In that as well are all of the loans that the city has.
yeah.
And these loans total, well, including with the pension, we're looking at like $31 million. But again, that's not due now, that's due over time.
Right, and there's if you look at the pages following that, there's payment schedules. for the
Okay,
debt.
so for us, you know, we do the budget. We're gonna be doing the budget, you know, very shortly.
Right.
And we're concerned with the budget. We're concerned with balancing the budget to make sure we have enough money in the bank to pay our bills as we go forward. What I'm wondering, if you can explain to me, how important is it for us to, I don't want to say understand, but to factor in this $31 million that's going to be paid out over the next 1,000 years or whatever. You know, I mean, it's like when you buy a house, you take a 30-year mortgage, and you look at this huge amount of money that you're going to pay for, but actually all you're paying is this small amount every month.
Right,
That's
right.
manageable.
Right.
The big thing is a little less manageable. So I guess what I'm asking is can you help me out here in, when I think about the budget and how much money the city has and how much we need, how much should I focus on this, you know, long-term debt?
So I would say the long-term debt, except for net pension liability, definitely needs to be something that needs to be addressed, because you have to make your debt service payments. Those are bonds that you got to build wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plants. Those payments have to be made unless you refinance it.
We're not looking at the totals, we're looking at the annual payments. That's a significant number we should be concerned with.
Right, the annual payments.
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
becoming due, yeah.
So in this statement, you're looking at $5.6 million of repayments for all these things.
Yeah.
That's the number we need to focus on.
Correct, and I
Correct.
believe when they do rate studies and things of that nature, they factor in those debt payments into increasing water rates, or what the water rates needs to be at in order to make those payments in the future.
Okay, so in answer to my question, when we're looking at our budget and how much money we have, how much money we need, we can look at this $31 million, the total long-term debt, as a kind of an interesting, put everything in perspective kind of thing.
Right,
But
right,
when we really look at the money, we should really look at your annual costs.
correct.
Okay.
Correct, yeah, and this net pension liability number is really, it's really a rough estimate, because it's a moving target. Because you don't know how long your retirees are gonna live, you do not know how well the market's gonna do. There's a bunch of assumptions that's taking into account when they determine that number. They're thinking the stock market is gonna grow at 7.5% from now until, you know,
Yeah.
20 years from now. So obviously, that's not gonna happen. So if you look at the required supplemental information for GASB 68, you'll see that there's actually 3 numbers in there. So we're assuming that the stock market is growing at 7.65%, I believe, for the foreseeable future. But in that table, in the required supplemental information, we also give what that net pension liability number would be at if the rate of growth is 6.5 versus 8.5. So you'll see that the number changes significantly. It goes from 6 million to a couple 100,000 or 12 million on the other, if the market does poorly. So I would say especially the net pension liability number, I wouldn't take that into significant account when doing your budgeting, yes.
I know you're not the PERS guy, so to speak, or that
Right, yeah, it's
you're
not.
the great Karnak and can tell us what's going to happen in the
Yeah.
future. But there was a time when PERS wasn't even charging cities their portion.
Correct.
Is that totally off the table, or if all of a sudden we have another windfall economically like we did a couple years ago, do you see that?
Yeah, I mean,
ever coming back
actually
to-
2000, okay, so the way they do it now is, so they don't, like, if you do have a great year, they don't want you to show it all in one year. What they do is they amortize any unexpected market changes over 3.8 years. So actually, 2014 was a great year, but you won't see all the benefit from that right away. You'll see it over 3.8 years. So the thinking is, if you have a great year, that's amortized. If you have a terrible year, that's also amortized. So it kind of smooths out the chart to be a more of a linear shape versus up and down and jagged. So, I mean, but to answer your question, yes, like when CalPERS first started, the city had no employer contribution because everything the employee puts in, the 7% or 8%, was enough to sustain the plan. But obviously, the market was growing at 15% back then. So I don't foresee that happening again.
And again, not that I'm vying for, hey, let's hope for the greatest
Right.
outcome, but more like, is that process still there, or at this point is PERS going to level things off from
Well,
this point on?
after 2012, all the new employees are on PEPRA now.
Yeah.
So it's a much more diminished, defined benefit plan. So you're really only worried about employees that were vested before that period. That's in this more variable plan with better benefits. So yes, I believe going onwards, it'll be much more controlled, but you'll have to wait till all these retirees receive all their benefits.
Thank you.
So,
We have a plan for that.
And just to add on to that, since we're in the middle of budget, I do know that our retirement for our classic safety members is gonna be 130% of their wages. So we're gonna be paying wages plus 130% of that towards their retirement.
Is that because it's a catch-up situation?
It's because of that, and because we have fewer and fewer safety, classic safety employees.
Paying
Because the
into it.
newer ones are PEPRA, and they have.
Would that
changes.
lower the,
No, it increases, because now you have to divide it over those 5 or 6 or 10 employees versus what might have normally been 20 employees.
I've been trying to figure out PERS for 15 years. Maybe one day we'll sit down over
Yeah.
coffee and you can explain it to me.
Yeah, but anyway, so it is important to look at these numbers because they do weigh heavily on our budget. That's the point I want to make.
okay. So, this net pension liability shows up only on the fund statements of the enterprise funds because they're full accrual. And it shows up on the governmental activities of the governmental funds. So that's, so governmental funds don't report long-term assets and liabilities in the funds themselves, but it's the GASB 34 conversion that creates governmental activities in the front, in the statement of net position. So it doesn't show up in the individual funds, but it does show up in the governmental activities when you combine the whole government together. One major change we made this year, and that's what caused some of the prior period adjustments, is the reclassification of a number of funds from expendable trust funds to non-major special revenue funds. So prior to 2003, when GASB 34 was implemented, there were these funds that were referred to as expendable trust funds. So these were usually one-time monies or specific grants that the city spent for specific purposes. So the thinking back then was that this was not really the city's money, since you had to spend it for a specific purpose. So they were classified as agency funds prior to 2003. But as part of GASB 34, the classification for these funds had changed. So what they determined is that since the city council determines how to spend the money, the finance department approves all the invoices and cuts all the checks, that these are actually gonna be classified as city funds. So they created a category of what's called special revenue funds. So they're funds to account for revenues that can be only used for a specific purpose. So for whatever reason, I believe it's just because they've been carrying on for so many years without becoming updated. The prior auditor had reported these as these expendable trust funds. And so we converted them to their correct categorization in the current fiscal year. So that's one of the prior period adjustments that we made. The other one was that there was a large infrastructure project in the water fund that was not capitalized in the prior fiscal year. So about $1.7 million was spent on a project. And when you spend money on projects in the enterprise funds, they need to be capitalized as construction in progress, an asset, instead of being expended. So that was not capitalized in the prior fiscal year. So we made a $1.7 million prior period adjustment to pull that out of fund balance, or add it back into fund balance, and then into CIP, and then into asset, because that project had been completed in the current fiscal year.
That project, it went over a couple of fiscal years, and when we went to move everything and capitalize the whole project, including the wages, that's when we realized that's not a good idea, because some of it happened in the prior fiscal, which is why we have a prior year.
So it's actually a good thing, because you're adding back assets, because you had shown them as expenditures before. So that's it for my presentation. Is there any questions?
Tons of them, I'm sure, but.
Yeah, so just, let's take a close look at it. There's a management report that has our one finding, and then the financial statements themselves, and then let Susie know about any of your questions, and then I will work with her.
I have a general question.
Yes.
You probably audit other entities like us.
Yes.
How do we, in a general response, how do we stack up compared to other cities?
I would say similar. Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary.
Good, bad? I mean, would you say if you were rating my entity here, what kind of grade would you give us if you could give
Well,
us that?
we gave an unmodified opinion, which is the highest grade. So it's kind of a pass, no pass. That's how audits work.
Okay, I know.
So
I guess.
No
A
commitment.
plus.
Susie just looked at me, so I wasn't going to say anything.
I know, you're giving me a lawyerly answer, so I figured I wanted to kind of push you a little bit. I want to, I think, and I'm new to the council, so I'm not going to take credit. Guys like Ron kind of stewarded us in a conservative way, so.
No issues. We encountered no major issues. Susie's been great providing us everything. I mean, I know she's busy, so it's a great help to us. So no complaints from us as far as the audit goes.
Just wanted to comment that, especially not being able to look at the numbers as you gave them out.
Yeah.
I found your presentation very understandable.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I try my best.
Very articulate, and so, yeah.
Well,
Maybe it's because I've been on the council too long. I don't know. But the
sometimes we do this where we go page by page, and it takes an hour, and
Oh.
I was looking forward
But
to
it was very,
Really? Okay, well, we could do a separate meeting with like the audit committee. Sometimes cities have an audit committee with people that are especially interested in numbers. And then we can sit and chat all day, whatever you want.
Well, thank you very
So,
much.
thank you. Thank you.
And Susie, this is just a presentation, right? So we've got, are we accepting the audit?
You're accepting it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that we have a
I guess,
choice.
we're receiving it, I guess. Receive and file the report. So do we need a
Is there an
motion?
action? Yeah, that's the question. Is there an action?
Did we done a motion on that?
You want to reject it?
Yes, so how about,
I think it's just receive and file.
yeah, so do we need I need a motion to receive and file, and then if you want to ask.
It doesn't
Just an
hurt.
acknowledgement or something.
Yeah.
Everybody nod their head.
I'll make a motion that we've received.
Consensus of the council to
Okay,
receive and file the report.
okay. All right, well, I guess we're on to A, Bartle Wells.
Okay. As you know, staff's been working with Bartle Wells, working on the rate studies for both water and wastewater. And after hearing the audit, I think probably you understand why. So today with us is Eric Helgeson, did I say it right?
Absolutely.
And Doug Dove with Bartle Wells. And these are the two gentlemen that staff has been working so diligently with. And they're going to present their water rate study.
Is that this?
So we don't have to straight next. We can just look at that, right?
Am I in the way here?
Are you going to be?
I'll be doing it, yes.
Okay. So.
Well, good evening. Pleasure to be here again. It's been quite a number of years since we did our last rate study. And got to try out the bypass today. It worked pretty well. And I like how the traffic is a lot calmer through town, so.
And you didn't wind up in Laytonville by mistake, right?
No, I didn't.
Good. You figured it out.
We took the Willits exit.
There you go.
Yeah, we figured it out. Okay, so last time water and wastewater rates were increased, I think it was probably around 2010 when we did a study, and the final steps of those multi-year increases were 2013 for water and 2014 for sewer. So now we're due for an update. And so I'd just like to go through, we've done a study of the finances and worked closely with staff to develop rates that are legally compliant, and we've smoothed out the rate increases so that there's no shocks to customers as much as possible. And we built all the capital costs into the projections and funded all those and the operating costs, and maintained prudent fund levels in both funds. So the water rate study, as you heard on the audit presentation, the water fund is in fairly good shape. We're looking at just 2.5% annual increases overall to keep the water fund in a strong position, keep reserves up, and fund capital cost. There's about, I believe, 4.2 million. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 4.2 million in water capital projects over the 5 years. And so we've got a significant amount of capital. This chart here shows our revenues, our expenditures, and the fund balance. And you can see revenues are the green, blue is the expenditures, and then the fund balance is the gray. And the fund balance is going to be drawn on a little bit, and then it'll rebound back up by the end of the 5-year period. So we're recommending 5 years of water rate increases at 2.5%. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some changes to the rate structure that we're recommending. In our projections, to smooth out these rate increases, we've included an $800,000 loan in 2018-19. This doesn't commit you to making the loan or borrowing the money, but you may find that you get some state low-cost loans, or maybe you just decide to use pay-as-you-go financing, cash. But we've included an $800,000 loan in 18-19 just to smooth the rate increases, so that we have each 2.5%.
So a loan obviously has to be paid back,
Exactly.
and that would be coming out of the rate revenue.
Right.
But doesn't that cost more than a slightly higher rate increase to smooth it out over the long, doesn't that cost more over the long run when you can figure in the interest, even on a low?
Always, yeah, loans, you're gonna have the interest cost, and over the long term, it's gonna cost a little bit more.
But you're projecting that it's not really going to impact the ratepayers who are going to be paying for the loan over the long term.
No, it's built in, the
Yeah,
2.5%.
that's what I'm saying, it's
yeah,
built in,
it's built
and it
in.
won't be that much of an impact. I mean, if you were to take that loan out,
Right,
and I'm sure you did the models.
yeah.
Not have a loan.
Yeah, not having the loan and just adding maybe another 0.25% or, whatever it would work out to be. Did you model that as well to compare it to this one?
I don't have that exact number as far as what additional percentage would be required.
Yeah.
You can see on the projection of the fund balances, this gray bar here each year, that, we're drawing down as low as 2 million.
Right.
So, you could cash fund it, but it would draw your fund balance down that 800,000 more than what we're showing. So you have a lot of options. We're not committing you to borrowing the 800,000. We're just saying, that's what we used in our projection.
Okay, so if we decide we don't want to borrow the $800,000, then the other option, could be increasing the 2.5% to maybe another 0.1% or 2 or whatever it would work out to be. I think that would be an important thing to understand. We're looking at one option, and I'm not really clear on what the ramifications are. And that sort of connects with another question I was going to have. Is this report the same as what we had in our packet? Because some of the numbers seem a little different.
Yeah, they should be the same.
It should be the same.
So, question. So on this bar chart, the 18-19 year shows revenues exceeding expenditures. Is that because of the 800,000 loan?
Yes.
Okay, so otherwise, we don't have a positive balance until 2021. So I think what Ron is exploring, and I think it's worth exploring, is what if we bump the rate up a little bit more in 18-19, and then, even, in other words, even it out by adjusting either the rate increase or using more cash up front rather than taking out a loan.
I don't think we can actually say, with any kind of accuracy, which would be better.
Sure.
But
No.
I would like to see what it looks like, what these other options are.
Larry has a question.
If you look at the economics of the community in order to see how the people in the community can pay for all of these things that you're talking about, to my knowledge, it's going to be really tough because the amount of population in Willits has gone down. The amount of money that the average person makes is certainly not going up by leaps and bounds. And I have probably been the one person on the council that has said more about the water rates than anybody else, because I think they're too high right now. And, which is not news to anybody in the room other than maybe you two. It's a lot of money for a family of 2 to 4 or 8 people in the family, just to pay the water rates. Did you take that into consideration at all when you decided that maybe this is the way to go?
We know it's difficult, but our analysis is based on the costs and the,
I'm not
budget,
saying that.
we did
I'm
not
saying
look
that
into-
as a parent, if you don't have the money to buy shoes, you don't buy shoes that day, because you have to pay cash for the money, for the shoes. And I'm saying that I think that the community is about tapped out, personally. And I haven't ran any kind of survey or anything else. I'm just saying that I have a really high water rate with the way the tiers are set up now. And if it wasn't for just my wife and I, and we're not growing anything other than
Grass.
really things other than, not even interpreted as grass, but as shrubbery and this type of thing, it's huge. I mean, the average person couldn't afford my water bill. And I, if you want to have a home and have something that looks nice, and I don't know if you guys have driven around our community or not, but there's a lot of people that don't have yards or anything anymore because they can't afford it. Did you take this into consideration?
yeah, we tried to keep these increases as low as reasonably possible, so that it doesn't impact people more than it has to, yeah.
So I'm going to assume, when I was looking at, and again, in some respects, I agree with Larry, because I personally, I'm a consumer of product here in town too, of
Right.
water, but at the same time, I toured our water plant, I toured our sewer plant, and what I get is, we're the gatekeepers. You correct me if what I'm saying is wrong, that when the water department either A, needs to do some sort of upgrade, or has to buy a new truck because the old one blew up,
Right.
or whatever, that under Prop 218, we're not supposed to be making tons, it's not technically supposed to be a for-profit business, it's just supposed to cover our costs.
And future costs.
And future costs. So we have to kind of plan a little bit for the future, kind of like as an individual, I would be going, hey, I'm going to need so much to cover my base expenses, and I should be planning that my insurance and taxes may be going up, so I budget a little more, set aside a little more. And I'm assuming that's, when you figure these rates, that's what you're also looking at, based on, you probably talked to our water and sewer staff and looked at
Right.
projects.
Right.
So I'm assuming we're the gatekeepers up here
We are.
at the budget
Yes.
process, so that when project comes forward and says, hey, whatever blew up, we need to replace it, we need to have the capital on hand, or I guess, looks like they have a loan on hand to pay for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Susie.
And then also keep in mind that some of our loans require that we keep a specific dollar amount or a specific percentage of the annual payment in reserves. So that's something that.
That's what predicates some of the
we've
amount that
given
we
all
have to
this-
have.
Right, so.
So,
All
Rob.
right, so while we're,
Sabrina had her hand up a while ago.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
That's right. I just wanted a clarifying, I had a question about the rate increase at 2.5%. Is that 2.5 each year?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, I just wanted to. And then the $800,000 loan is on top of the 2.5% increase?
No, that's,
Or it's taken into account, that
It's
there'll be a
taken into account.
repayment for the 800,000? Okay.
And that's done as a leveling thing. We can
Yes.
either choose to
yes,
raise rates higher, or with anticipated costs or expenses, then we get that to kind of level things out so that we're not forcing the rates up higher as we go along.
right.
And we could also, I guess, like when you're driving the road, you can also decide to slow it down a little bit. So even though we have a hearing and get a certain rate, I'm assuming that if next year Scott Herman tells us, hey,
Right.
that widget project isn't going to happen because A, the technology's not there, and we're not going to do that, so then we could, for that coming year, adjust or decide not to raise those rates because we're not going to have to capitalize that? Is that?
Yeah, we would send out a 218 notice of the rate recommendation, and those would be the ceilings of the rates for each year. So if you defer projects, or you get some additional revenue, or expenses are lower, you can reduce the amount below what is approved.
We have actually done that on the
Yeah.
last go-around. There was at least 1 or 2 years where we did not impose the rates. But while we're on the subject of impact to people, and I know that's not your job. You know, you're just crunching the numbers. That's our job. We have to worry about the impact that any of these rates will have on the citizens. But let me ask you a hypothetical question. I know you base these projected proposed rates on, you know, future costs, the current and future costs, operating and capital costs going out at least 5 years.
Right.
So what if we decided that we don't want rates, we don't want rate increases, we want to keep it the same way it is right now for some time into the future? What would that look like?
Not good. You would, you know, for a little while, it would be okay. You just wouldn't be able to afford your capital projects, so you wouldn't be investing in infrastructure, replacement of existing stuff. So, you know, you have a lot of assets in the ground, in treatment plants, both water and wastewater, and you can defer maintenance. You know, it's just like your car. You don't need to take it in for the 5,000-mile oil change. You can defer it, but it'll catch up to you. And I've seen cities where they put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off until they were having a main break every day in their city. And they couldn't take it anymore, and they had to have these massive rate increases.
And that's actually what did happen about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
For, I don't know, a period of maybe 5 years, the council did not raise the rates. And like you said, it caught up to us. And man, all of a sudden, the ratepayers woke up and they got slammed.
Right.
But we had to do this stuff because everything was falling apart.
Right, and I give a little seminar, and I recommend that you do small annual adjustments. You know, don't put it off, because if you put off the 2.5% this year, next year it's gonna be 5 or more, because you've lost the revenue. You didn't get any for the year that you didn't have it. And so, you know, you can defer it, but it'll catch up to you. And it's better to just keep moving the rates a little bit each year and keep up with all the costs and the maintenance.
And just to put a fine point on it, I think these are important points for people who are watching, that here we are, we're getting maybe ready to slam them with a rate increase. I think it's important that everybody understands. Are we talking about a rate increase so we can give our operators a raise, or to buy shiny new equipment, or, you know, things like that? Or are we talking about needing money to continue being able to provide water to the citizens?
Yes, that's it. It's to continue to provide water reliably, and, you know, we're not talking about any big increases in salary or big projects or anything like that. It's basically ongoing maintenance and you know, investment in the infrastructure that you have, and basic operating costs.
Sabrina had a question.
That was gonna be my question, is that $800,000, do you have any breakdown for us of what percentage, where that's gonna go? Is that all for capital improvements?
Yeah, it's
A
all for
large
capital.
percent, all for
Yeah.
capital improvements?
And we have a list of the projects.
And
There was a list in your packet.
Okay.
Yeah.
what percent payback are you estimating on that?
We used an assumption of 15-year loan at 3% for planning purposes.
And also,
I'm sorry, Adrian had.
Well, I just wanted to say that essentially what we're talking about here is taking a very prudent approach to these rate increases, not unlike the prudent approach that we've taken with our overall budgeting.
Yeah.
Susan.
and also this incorporates the one tier, actually it's a 2-tier, but, instead of having the 4 or 5 tiers that we currently have. And there's actually a decrease in the meter based on this in the meters. And I don't think even through the 5th year, it still doesn't get up to where it is now. So there's offsets, and I believe when I was talking with Eric earlier, when we were talking about a water, just a typical water user that uses 3 units of water, which gets them at a $31 a year increase.
Yeah, I have some information in the presentation we'll get to.
Yeah, I have some questions
Sorry,
when
I
we
jumped
get to
ahead.
Okay.
So I have some.
So, rates and charges have become very litigious over the past 10, 15 years. And it's the interpretation of Proposition 218, which was approved in 1996 by the voters. So, we need to base the rates on the actual costs and the allocation of those costs to each customer based on their benefit and their use of the system. And so there was a case in 2015, the San Juan Capistrano case, which the judge ruled that the city did not provide enough of a basis for their high tier. Basically, they had a high tier at $8 or $9 per unit, and a low tier of like $2 or $3 per unit. And the higher tier was subsidizing the lower tier. So until this judgment, that was considered okay as long as all the revenue from that was collected was the amount that was needed to run the system. In the judgment, they found that each tier has to be cost justified. So if you can't justify that high tier, you can't levy it. And so that city had to refund a whole lot of money to their residents.
So in light of the drought that we've been through,
Right.
5 years, I mean, this seems to put a whole different spin on water in
Right.
state. Isn't there some justification for, let's call it a surcharge, to hire users to try to get them to not use so much? Doesn't that enter into the mix at all?
Only if you can come up with a cost basis for that. You know, if it actually costs more to serve that high customer. And
But not a factor that they may be depleting our water supply out of proportion to everybody else.
you could possibly argue that and develop some sort of an analysis, but, it's not gonna be very simple and clear. So, right now, the city has a 4-tier structure. And we're recommending that we change that to a 2-tier structure in light of the San Juan Capistrano rule. And that would have, basically, the first tier would be set at the cost of your surface water, and the second tier would be based on the cost of groundwater. And so that is reducing the number of tiers. The lowest tier that you have is going to go away, and the highest tier is going to go away. And we're going to be left with 2 tiers. One other change is you need to start charging the city for the water that the city uses. Up until now, a lot of agencies didn't charge themselves, the municipal government, for the water and sewer use. That has gone through the courts, and it's clear that you have to charge yourself. So if the city parks use water in the summer, they need to pay for the water. A client of mine got sued on that, City of Davis, and they lost. So we're recommending highly that you start paying, the city pay its own bills, and that would cost about $100,000 a year.
But how does that help to secure the water fund? I mean, it's not like we're taking in extra money, it's switching hands. There's the same amount of money is coming in, as going out, it's just coming from different places.
But it's enterprise, right, versus.
It's
Well,
an
yeah, but
enterprise fund, yeah.
No, I
so-
understand that, but the bottom line is still gonna be the same.
It's gonna shrink our general fund, but it's gonna increase our water fund, which could potentially keep the water rates lower for
Right.
customers, but it's gonna make it harder for us
On the general fund.
on the general fund and how we're gonna pay the bills to meet other needs.
Yeah, you're, I mean, I get that, I'm just looking at the whole bank account, I guess. But-
Yeah, it's segregated funds. The
Yeah.
enterprise is a business fund for the water and sewer.
And you've calculated about 100,000 is what?
Yes.
At how we're currently, do we have any other options for saving money to water our fields and our parks?
Not at this time. We are looking at irrigation improvements, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that under our city manager reports. But we haven't, for example, gone to recycled water. That's quite a process to go through with the regulatory agencies. It's something we would certainly like to do, but it's not currently on the horizon.
And it should be known that Rec Grove and the ball field are off of well water already that's not potable, so, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about City Park, the Highway 20 strip.
And Babcock.
Babcock.
Snyder, and the sewer plant, and then any city hall offices.
So, my question had to do with when we get over to the proposed 5-year rate schedules, I'm wondering if there's a possibility of including any of the initial couple of units of water as part of the fixed charges, instead of having the fixed charge and then you add for each unit of water you add. But to have that structured in such a way that the total revenue comes out the same. But I think it
Right.
effectively encourages the kind of water conservation that we're talking about, and it doesn't impact the people that have a small little house and lot and are really like at the edge, and their rates wouldn't be going up as much if they only had to pay basically the fixed meter charge, and that included some of their water use, and they could just conserve and not go up into.
Yeah, actually, if we included some units with the fixed monthly charge, we'd have to increase the fixed monthly charge.
Right. But it
So
would, but
it's actually better for small users that they're not included, because they just pay the fixed and then the unit charge.
Well,
A lot
but-
of agencies do still, have an allowance of water with the meter charge, and that's a structure that's kind of slowly disappearing because of, conservation considerations. But what we do when we do those rates is we take the fixed charge, and then whatever number of units of water are included with the meter, we add that cost in.
right, but here an example would be on that page 7, which you're not up there on that, but if you have your, let's say a 5/8 inch meter for a single-family home, and right now you're proposing it goes down by $3,
Right.
but then their first unit of water goes up, so they're already paying more right there than they are now.
Right.
Whereas if you added the first unit of water into the fixed charge, yes, the fixed charge would be higher, but they wouldn't have to pay for the first unit or two of water. So I think it might be, my theory is that would help the low water use households actually not get as big of a rate increase overall when you add those two together. Whereas the people that have a great big yard and love to landscape and they're going to have to pay more because they're going to use more units of water.
Yeah, I disagree. I think, if we included units of water with the meter, we're proposing the rate for a 5/8 inch meter.
Yep.
The monthly rate is $23.46.
Right.
And then each unit from 0 to 6 is $5.68.
from 0
So
to
if we
3.
include a unit, that would, take this over $29, then the fixed charge would have to go to over $29.
But, yeah, but it's already gonna be over $29 when you add the existing $26 plus $378, they're already paying $29, or 30. They're already paying $30.
Right, and I
If they use
guess
any water at
there's no
all.
free
I know,
lunch here.
I know there isn't, but I'm saying, I think if you combined that first tier, which is now gonna be for the first 3 units rather than only one, well, it's actually the same, right? The first 3 units are gonna be at tier 1. Or the first 6 you've got, okay.
Yeah,
But
first
if, let's say you're using 1 or 2 units a month, and I'm saying if you add this number and this number, and you figure, let's say the average house is gonna use a couple units, or maybe even 3, if they're, if they're being conservative. Under your proposal, they are paying more because you add the units that they use to the picture. I would just like to, for
So,
analytical purposes, have a comparison of what would happen if you increase the fixed cost charge and allow the first couple of units of water to be covered by that, and then see what the rates would have to be to make up the amount of revenue we need. That's what I'm looking for that.
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
am I understanding that you want it to be 23.46 plus $5.68 times 2? So $34.82 is what you want the minimum to be.
That's probably right, yeah.
And then, but then, I mean, then you run into the thing, what if they only use one thing now, and they're paying,
They're paying more.
Yeah.
Well, it could even just be the first unit. I'd like to know, for example, how much does an average small household with a small lot
we don't,
use when they're being conservative?
we don't.
Probably 2, 3
2 to 3
units.
Yeah.
But essentially, you would be forcing people to buy water whether or not they use it. If you say, okay, you have to pay your fixed charge, which includes 1 unit.
Mhm.
Okay, well, what if I go on vacation and I don't use anything?
Well,
Then I still have to pay for the
yeah,
unit.
but everybody has to pay a fixed charge, and that was one of the things that we've talked about before, is that just having the meter there and the pipes and everything else, there is a fixed charge that everybody has to share.
Right.
Even if the house is vacant for a year or 2 or whatever, they still have to pay that.
Right.
So I understand that. And I don't mind having that charge be a little bit higher. What I'm looking for is the occupied homes that are at that, at the level where already it's hard for them to pay their water bill. If there's a way for them to be conservative with their water use and not have the increase, and those who are using more, which is what drives the cost up, yes, it spreads to all of them. So if there's a way to compare that, and I can't run the numbers, I have no idea how you do that, but I think it's worth exploring that. And as you said, there are other jurisdictions that have that, where the first unit or 2 is included with their fixed charge.
Yeah, and we get the pushback from the residents that, hey, you're forcing us to buy 2 units of water every month, whether we do it or not.
Mhm.
Honestly, I think having the fixed charge and then the volumetric charge is the best way for folks who conserve to save money. Because they're not, they have full control over their volumetric cost. We're not saying, okay, you've got to buy 2 units a month or anything, you pay the fixed charge for your readiness to serve, and then you pay however many units of water you use. And it's up to you. If you want to conserve, then you can keep your bill down.
Well, it's true that if you look at the proposed 17-18 year, if you only used 1 unit and you're in that first tier and 5/8 inch meter, you actually are going to save money that first year.
Yes. Yes.
If you use 2 units, you're going to
Yeah.
not save too much. But so maybe that's a way to alleviate that financial burden is, you know, if you're really conservative.
Ron had a question.
Yeah, I'm starting to question my sanity here. Because I'm looking at this proposed 5-year water rate
Why
schedule.
don't we put that one up, because that's,
Oh, here we go.
Page
So
That one there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The existing, Tier 1 is $3.78. Tier 1 for the proposed 17-18 is $5.68.
Right,
And
per
we-
unit.
right. Per
And
unit.
we're looking at an increase of 2.5%, right?
Mhm.
So to determine what 2.5% added to 378 is, the way you're supposed to do it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is multiply $3.78 by 1.025, correct?
No, because we're changing structure. So, in other words, we're going from 4 tiers to 2.
Okay,
The
so what
prior
you, all right, so what you've
structure-
done, it's not just a straight through for year 1, for 17-18, it's
Right.
not just straight through, it's
Right.
a new number.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's
I
a bit
was
of a
getting
structure
little-
change,
Okay.
and so not everybody's gonna get the 2.5%, some will get a little bit less, some a little bit more. The lowest rate, the 378, was essentially subsidized by the highest Tier 4 rate. We're not allowed to do that anymore.
Okay.
So we're left with these two tiers.
And then it's 2.5% from there on.
Yeah, yes, every year.
Gotcha.
All right, and then these are some, oh, go ahead.
I had a question. I had a thought. We were talking about that $100,000 a
Right.
year that the city will have to pay. Well, we're talking about a loan for $800,000. We know that we're likely to have to pay $500,000 over the next 5-year period. Couldn't that be factored into the $800,000, or was it already factored in?
It was already factored in. Sorry, but good try.
Yeah, so this rate increase includes the debt loan,
Right.
the debt burden
For the 300.
for the $800,000. That's included in the 568 and the 583 in those numbers. And what I had asked before is, what would it look like if we didn't borrow the $800,000, but we just increased, instead of 2.5%, we increased it by 2.75% or whatever? What would those numbers look like?
Well, I would
It might,
suggest
it might be less.
we just take it out of the fund balance
No,
instead of the
no,
borrowing
because-
the 800.
Well, that's another option, but then the fund balance will disappear eventually.
You'd still have over $1 million.
Well, what I would like to see, and I'll repeat this again, because I really, really would like to see this, is more options. One option is what you proposed, an $800,000 loan, and that's what we're looking at right now. The second option would be forget the loan and increase the 2.5% by whatever amount it would have to be to still give us the end numbers. Is there a third option? I
Which
think
would
you
be what percent?
Yeah, whatever that
With
percent
Ron's-
would work out.
With
to be.
Ron's theory for option 2, what percent do you guesstimate?
I think it, you know, I don't know, what do you think, Eric, maybe 5-10%? For that 1 year?
No, it would have to be, amortize it out over the next,
It would have to be
15
variable
years.
based on the capital improvements, correct?
but I would look at it to amortize it over
Yeah.
15 years, which would be the length of this $800,000 loan.
I think Eric's gonna have a lot more.
Well, in 1819 and 1920, the capital improvement plan has a little over $1 million. So it's to kind of help mitigate the spikes in the capital improvement plan. Also, as Doug is going to talk about in the wastewater plan, there's a greater need to have a loan for wastewater. So part of the reason we were doing the loan for water was to coincide with the wastewater loan to reduce the overall borrowing costs.
Okay, but that still didn't really answer the question.
And the overall increase, the overall revenue increase, I can get that for you.
Oh, yeah, but basically what we're looking at, I think it would be accurate to figure that out over a 15-year period. which would be the same period of the $800,000 loan. So in other words, we're looking now at a 2.5% rate increase over 5 years. So if you can take that $800,000, and I'm not sure, you got some magic numbers there, and it's charts and things, you just plug in numbers, but it seems to me that you can come up with a number that would modify the 2.5% increase to whatever it would have to be in order to give us the same end result in 5 years. But you can amortize that. I'm probably talking about two different things at the same time, but we're looking at a 15-year, $800,000 loan at 3%. Instead of that, how much would you have to raise the rates over the next 5 years in order to give us the same end result in 15 years? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I guess, and Ron, I don't take this as I'm poo-pooing your idea, but if we go with Ron's plan, then we have to have the political will to continue raising rates, and we won't have a lot of wiggle room. Is that a possible outcome? Versus loan versus not? I mean, I guess in one, we get a loan and it levels things. In the other one, and again, it may make more financial sense that we don't get a loan.
We're committed to 15 years
Yeah,
of payments.
Yeah, I think, by paying cash, that's always cheaper, but you need a little bit higher rate increases in the first 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, the option number 3, I just reminded you.
Okay.
Option number 3, you had mentioned if we dip into the reserve fund, what would that look like instead of the $800,000?
That's the same as paying cash.
I think it would be the same.
Well,
We have
what-
to keep the reserve.
Well, no, I'm not talking about what the
balance.
rates would look like. I'm talking about what would the reserve fund look
Right,
like.
okay.
That's what we're really impacting.
Or,
So there's a lot of moving balls
or
here.
Ron, or maybe the potential that how low in the reserve fund, because it may be a.
Well, yeah, there is
next year.
that, right.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to keep a statutory or a.
But it's something that, we need to, understand, if we do this, what's gonna happen?
Okay.
All right, Madge, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just realized, I did some math here.
Okay.
Well, and I'm really pretty happy because it seems to me that between the current 16-17 rates and the 17-18 rates, the smaller household that conserves water, if they only use 1 unit of water, they actually save $1 per year instead of going up by 2.5%. And if they use 2 units of water, they pay an extra 80 cents.
Right.
So it's not very much at all.
And if they pay
So,
3, it's 2.
the more water they use, then the differential is going to go up. But by keeping that fixed charge a little bit lower than it is existing, you're essentially accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish.
So what you do, you added those together?
Yeah, I added this together, and then with one unit, yeah, if you only use 1 unit, you save $1 in 2017,
Including the
18.
fixed charges.
Including the fixed charges. If you use 2 units, you pay an extra 80 cents.
That's a good way of looking
And
at it.
then, from then on, it's going to increase a little bit, but not too bad.
But I agree with Ron, I would like to see what does option 2 look like?
Okay.
Or 3.
Yeah.
Well, because I think the hard part is, obviously, a lot of it depends, the moving target is, do we do those capital projects? Can they be done? And so that influences, but the other one is, we have that, obviously, responsibility of the ratepayers. I, for one, don't like don't raise rates for 5 years, then kill me with a 15% increase. That,
Right.
When we did that a couple of years ago, it was a sticker shock.
Right.
I'd rather know it's coming little by little, but I'd like to know that, and again, I think I reported out a couple meetings ago that, looking at the diligence that our staff out there, they're finding ways to reuse old equipment to do things, so it's not like they're up there just getting brand-new trucks and
That's right.
doing, things they don't need to do just
Keeping the
because.
system functioning.
Yeah, so go ahead.
So,
Aren't you glad you came tonight?
oh, yeah.
That's good stuff.
So on the next chart, we have a rate impact for water. Your median customer, typical customer is going to see about $1 increase per month.
Yeah.
From $45 to $46. An average customer would be, actually a dollar would go down, just because the way the tiers hit, the new tier structure. And then a higher user would see a little bit, see about an $8 reduction. And this is because the way the tiers are set up now, we have the higher users paying more. We can't do that anymore. So they're gonna see a little bit of a reduction on the higher users. Oops. So just to put it in perspective, your rates are near the average of the area, and Golden State and Clear Lake and North Gualala are higher, but we're not looking at a very big increase in your rates for water.
Can I, and again, you may not have an
Yes.
answer, but is it just some of these other entities are bigger than we are? Is it just they're able to deliver service, obviously without charging the customers as much? Is there any explanation for why we would be more for the same?
I think there's a lot of factors. You have a pretty tight water supply here, and that tends to mean costs go up. Larger agencies can spread the cost out over more customers. You know, may depend on your system, how old it is.
So economies of scale and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, well, I just figured if I didn't ask it, someone in the public is gonna wonder why.
Well, when you look at Brook Trails and Calpella on the comparison chart, though, they're both lower, and they're not large communities.
They're very close. It's very comparable.
Part of ours is that we have developed this groundwater system.
Right.
And like Brook Trails does not have the groundwater system.
So wastewater. Wastewater rates were last increased in 2013, I believe, and July 1st, 2013. You're looking at about 3.9 to 4.9 million in capital spending. So, you know, significant investment in the infrastructure, which is needed.
We're still looking at infrastructure investment in the wastewater going forward? I thought we were pretty much done with all that stuff.
Well, you'll see on,
You know, it was in your packet, the capital program. I can tell you right now what it is.
Yeah, I see it.
You have a vacuum truck, TV truck, line replacement, you know, there's a lot of stuff. Pickup
Okay, so it's not the system itself, it's more.
It's not the
equipment
treatment
and stuff.
stuff.
Right.
No, it's more of the collection system.
Right.
Yeah,
Street.
right, Main Street. So,
Wow, okay.
yeah. And so, same type of thing, we were looking at a $2.4 million loan on wastewater in 2018-19, just for the cash flow to smooth out the rates. So in wastewater, we're looking at 2 7% increases, followed by a 5, and then a 2 4.5s. And we're not proposing any changes to the wastewater rate structure. So these would be just flat increases. And the impact on the customers, right now, for a single-family home, it's $739 per year on the tax bill. And we're looking at, with a 7% increase, going up to $791 per year, which is a $52 a year increase, or $4.31 a month increase.
Okay, you're showing two 7% increases in 17-18 and 18-19. But when I look at the capital the capital project spreadsheet, it looks like there's going to be even more money. I'm sorry, 1920 and 2021 are going to be considerably higher than 17, 18, 19.
Right, and
So why are we looking at, you know,
the 7% are required to meet debt covenants. You know, you have to maintain revenues at certain levels. You have some existing debt, and we're looking at a little additional borrowing. So we're kind of, you know, being controlled by the debt covenants.
okay, maybe I'm not understanding that, but let me rephrase my question, and maybe you might be able to.
Sure.
Instead of, say, 7% for 17, 18, and 18, 19, what if it was 6% or 5%, and then you took the extra percentage into succeeding years? Wouldn't that do the same thing?
You need to, you know, we obviously would prefer to go that way if we could, but we needed to meet the requirements of your existing debt
So
and have revenues at levels sufficient to comply with what you promised.
So are you saying then that if we do not increase the rates by 7%, our revenues would fall below what is needed to pay off our existing debt plus the future new debt?
Yes.
And to be in compliance.
Pardon?
And to be in compliance.
And what is the compliance thing again?
When we took out the loans
Yeah.
or the bonds, we promised to have our revenues cover all expenses, including bonds, by a certain percentage.
So you're saying though that, but what's changed that we need to goose it up like that?
Well, we haven't had rate increases for a couple of years, and now we need to get the revenues back up to, you know,
Okay,
meet
so when
these
we,
covenants.
so when we looked at the rate increases, whenever,
Yeah.
2010, I guess,
Yeah.
we haven't quite reached the goal? Is that what you're saying? We have a bit of a shortfall?
Yeah, the revenues have been going down a little bit, or they're not increasing in line with expenses.
And although our last lender allowed us to use our reserves, what we have in reserves, and we were able to count those towards, if those fall, which they are, because we're spending more than we're bringing in,
Okay.
then we have to keep our reserves at a certain level.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
So because rates weren't raised higher previously, now the council has to address raising even higher rates now.
Right.
Right. So, the comparison on wastewater, you're in the middle of the pack here, very close to the average.
This is the new charges.
Yes, and
Right.
this is, the current rate is equivalent to $61.58 a month for sewer. And that would go up to $65.89, so it's about a $4.31 increase per month. That's on a monthly basis.
And interestingly, we're on the lower spectrum for sewer rates in comparison to other cities.
Well, and I guess that's another question.
Yeah.
The other one, I could say economies of scale, they got us beat because they got more customers. Why is that we're not, why aren't we higher?
I think, you know, each system has its own configuration, and I know Santa Rosa has to pump its effluent all the way up to the geysers to inject it into the ground. It's very much more capital intensive. Plus, Willits got some favorable funding from the USDA for its wastewater treatment plant, so that helped keep the cost low. I know, you know, Healdsburg has just done a lot of work on their system, and some of these folks, eventually, they're gonna be replacing their treatment plant, and they'll jump up high. you know.
And I know there are a lot of factors, I just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of throw it out there, because I know that as we look to raise rates, people are gonna ask, well, wait. Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, I was looking at the capital costs, which clearly jumped way up in 1920 and 2021, which is sort of why we're front-loading, getting revenues higher when we are, what we're proposing. Do we have to do the Main Street project in 1920 because of the Caltrans?
Right.
And what about the Coast Street North and South? Could that be postponed by a year, or are we be in trouble there?
I can't answer that, I don't know.
I'm just wondering if there's any way we could push some of the capital costs a little bit, because I realize that stuff, when you're talking about like the oil, getting your oil change.
Yeah, right.
You don't want to like wait too long,
I think
but.
if we could have, we would have put it into 21, 22, and 2021.
Yeah,
It's
So-
the infrastructure that is in there now,
is in trouble.
yes.
But, in actual fact, we've had these projections every year at budget time. And I think, to my memory, more often than not, these numbers, they do manage to get pushed forward for one reason or another.
But you can't continue
I
doing
know,
that
I
without
know.
having a significant.
But I mean, there's always that possibility. And like you said, some of them, we've hit the
Yeah,
wall.
we've kicked the can down the curb as
Right.
far as we can.
Susie?
And
Yeah,
I just want to remind council that if you kick the can, you can also delay the increase. It's just because you're saying this is the maximum that we will increase in this year, you don't have to go
To the maximum.
to that max level each year. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, and I think my experience from prior budgets and just not being on the council, but watching it,
Yeah.
is that, and Ron, you could probably chime in, that sometimes we meant to do it, not because we were kicking the can, but because something wasn't available, or timing wasn't right, or it rained like crazy, and so the construction season was kicked to another year.
Yeah, and then,
So that's,
you know,
all those sort of things play in, and it's not, because I mean, I gotta tell you, we can easily kick the can and then let the next council, 2 or 3 years down the road, take the heat for really raising rates. I mean, that's the thing.
that would be a terrible thing.
So, so that means that what you're proposing is the maximum that we would be allowed
Yes.
to
Yes.
increase. It would be 7% this coming fiscal year,
Yeah.
7% the following year, et cetera. And then it goes down, thank God.
Yeah.
But we could theoretically decide to do it a little bit less. I just think 2 7% in a row,
Well, we're
again,
looking-
is, what Larry said before, is that it's gonna be hard for
We're
some.
But
looking
this
at
is
$4
to-
a month though, on the average.
And as it's already been stated, the 7%, 2 years in a row, is to bring us into compliance with our promise on
Yeah.
our loans.
Right, if we spend that and bring our reserves
So
down.
I have a question for you gentlemen, or Susie. So I see the next steps are send Prop 218 notice, as though council has some questions regarding on the water. Would we still send the notices out, but then we have more info, or do we need another explanation
I think
before?
we have to wait till we decide if this is what we want to do.
So that's what I was curious.
Well, on the wastewater, since it's collected on the tax roll, we need to have that information to the county in early August. So
Okay.
wastewater is on a pretty tight schedule.
So when you say early August, if we have certain questions that we have posed to you.
Right.
And if we get the answers, let's say by the next council meeting in 2 weeks. Or
Yeah.
whenever, that would still be enough time for us to move forward with this, correct?
On both items, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Because what I would also like to see, just like with the water, we're looking at this $2.4 million loan. And again, what would that look like if we had option 1, 2, and 3?
Well, but I don't think we have the capital in this enterprise account, is that correct?
Right.
You don't have the reserves, right?
We don't have option 3 on
Okay.
wastewater.
Okay, so 1 and 2 though.
Yeah, okay.
And again, it's just informed, we make a decision so that when we get beat up by the
Right, I understand.
citizens, we can at least,
And Ron, after we mail out the 218s, then there's a 48 or 45-day period, and then we have a public hearing.
Yeah.
So we
That
do
one has-
want to keep, I think that's why he was
Oh,
saying
yeah,
we're in a
to
tight
back-
thing,
yeah,
because we
right.
have 45 days, and we need to have it done by August 1st, so that when we send it to
Okay.
the county, otherwise we're going to be a whole another year.
okay, so our next council meeting would be May 17th,
24th.
20,
24,
okay.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah, that's
Is that
fine.
enough
Yeah,
time?
2 weeks, right. So if we do that, if we get that information by then and we act on it at that point, will we have enough time to,
It'll be tight, but if we could mail those notices out very quickly and then hit your last July meeting.
Well, we routinely have one meeting in July?
right?
Yes. So,
I
normally.
mean, we could always have a special meeting too, if we need to, just for this one item.
I have
Uh,
a question.
May I, Chad?
Oh.
Madge.
Really for the council, if these are basically a notice that we are looking at rate increases of up to these amounts, doesn't tie us to actually, we could always go
Yeah.
below that. Why, would there be a downside to sending out the rate notice, that notice now, and then during that 45-day period, if we can find out that there's a
Yeah.
little adjustment, we still could.
Can we do
But
that?
Yeah.
Would that be,
Sure.
So the 218
Should we
notice,
go down and up, or
Down,
just
only
down?
down.
only down.
Yeah.
So if you send out the notice with these numbers,
then,
and I don't think there would be any interest in the council to go higher.
no.
Well,
no
except that
matter
if
how
you're
the
gonna
loan-
pay cash, right?
But that would decrease, potentially, it might decrease the amount that the ratepayers have to pay because we're not paying interest. If we
Well, but no,
Right,
but it would
there-
raise the rates
well,
though.
Because then we
Would it?
need to
Oh,
get our
you're
reserves
right.
back,
That might be,
right?
okay, you're right.
Okay, so what would happen, let's say now you have the rate schedules here for both of these things.
Yeah.
And you would present them in the 218 notice.
Right.
What if you arbitrarily inflated those numbers for the notice, and sent that out with the understanding that it's going to be no higher than that, and it might be lower when we actually do it? Does that work?
Yeah, we just did that in Pacifica. They had a big project they were bidding out, and the bidding climate is really crazy contractor market right now. So they didn't know if they were gonna hit their engineering estimate or be 25% higher or 50% higher. So we actually went out with higher increases on the notice.
So if
With the
that's the-
caveat that if they came in low.
Okay, so
we
if
can
that's
reduce
the
it.
case, then we
Yeah.
could act on this tonight with a higher number, and then come back the next meeting or whenever, when we have these questions answered, and firm up the numbers.
But it can't be an artificially inflated number.
Yeah,
like
that's-
you
I guess
said.
that's
No,
what I
It's
was
got to
thinking.
be a number that reflects the cost of providing the service.
So they would have to come up with an articulable cost that would be on the high end, I guess assuming your high number.
Yeah. Eric has run a number. Do you want to present that?
For water, you kind of have the reserves be at the equivalent level at the end of 5 years would be 4% increases each year, rather than the 2.5% with the loan.
Without the loan.
Yeah, without the loan would be 4% increases each year for the water. to have the-
Okay, and with the loan, we're looking at 2.5% increases.
Yeah.
So at the end of that period, the rates would be about 7.5% higher if you don't get it.
Well, I guess that answers the question, doesn't it?
Well, I just kind of did some rough math to figure out for a single-family residence, how much does that really impact them for the year? And I came up with about $120 per year. Does that sound right? That the average single-family would have to pay between wastewater
For both.
and, yeah, with both.
Yeah, we were looking at $1 or something, $1.50, $1.40 for water. So let's say $6 a month times $12.
$6 a
72
month for which,
for water and wastewater.
for water and wastewater?
That's the increase.
Because I took, okay, because I took your monthly bill
Well, we're looking at
for Willits.
$3 a month. No, we're looking at $4 a month for
On sewer. Sewer is $4.31.
Right.
And water, we're saying for $4 unit per month
Goes up
user.
$1.
Goes up $1.42, I think. Yeah.
$5.72 a month.
So you're looking-
For purposes of a
I'm sorry,
218.
$5.72 a month.
Okay, because I used a different chart.
For purposes of a Prop 218 notice to the customers, to everybody, what you would be saying you would be having up to and then fill in the blank, 2.5% increase per.
Yeah, we would have a narrative of, why the increase is needed, and also the exact rates that are proposed, which would be the ceilings.
Right.
You could always adopt lower.
Okay,
So, yeah,
if
so
those
my
options
suggestion.
come back, it might be less than 2.5%.
Right, so my suggestion is that we have the notice that would say an up to 4% increase on the basis of what you just said about if we don't take out a loan on the water side, and then what you have on the wastewater side. I don't think we really have any choices here. So if the other council members are amenable to that, I think I would suggest we go ahead and get the
Yeah, but-
notice out so that the clock is ticking and.
I agree about getting the notice out, but it seems to me, if I understand what you said, that if we do not take the loan on the water, then these 2.5% increase would have to become 4% increases. Well, that seems like a no-brainer right there.
Well, it's because that's a 5-year period instead
Oh,
of
is that what you
advertising
figured
the
it
loan
for?
over.
To have your fund balance be in a similar place at the end of the 5-year period,
Right.
you would need 4%.
So we can't look at a 15-year period because the fund balance, well, why would the fund balance be impacted?
Or can we only do 5-year increments?
Yeah, you do 5-year increments for the increases.
No, I understand that, but why would the fund balance be impacted?
Because you're gonna be paying cash
Spending money.
for projects.
That's right, okay, all right. I think I'm reading my saturation.
So, I'll try to make that motion, that we approve going out with a rate notice, whatever you call it, notification, with the maximums of the 4% on the water and 7%, and changing, basically what,
What this would be.
yeah,
Yeah.
on the
Because
wastewater
the
side.
other's a straight line.
And that we get that notice out, and then when it comes back at the end of the period of time, we can evaluate that trade-off of paying cash versus taking out a loan. And any other adjustments.
Do I have a second on Madge's motion?
If I can figure out what the.
Well, the motion is to send out the notice.
Yeah, right.
But to
Using those.
allow that higher percent if we decide to go that route of not taking out a loan.
4% for the next 5 years.
Discussion. So do I have a second to
Yeah,
Madge's?
I'll second.
All right, now, further discussion. Larry?
This 218 has to go out for both water and sewer at the same time?
It doesn't have to, but you'll save money by combining them into one letter.
Because the sewer rate is the one that's under the time crunch, not the water.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, the downside of if we do the loan, again, because I'd rather, if I was gonna raise people's rates, I'd rather do 2.5 versus 4.
Me too.
Yeah.
What's the downside again, other than is it for a longer period of time or still the 5 years?
Just have an interest cost over the life of the loan, but another thing to think about too is you're doing these capital costs, these capital projects now that are benefiting people over a period of time, so you're also allowing some intergenerational equity when you do a loan.
Madge, is your a motion for the 4 or the 2.5%?
Well, my motion is to.
Up to 4.
Is to have notice include up to 4%, with the understanding that we might very well opt to just do the 2.5%, or we can, as long as we're below that cap.
But would it explain that in the 218?
Yeah, that's a question I
Yeah.
would like to have.
Yes, definitely.
In bold letters, because that's what it's gonna take.
That, or we're gonna have a lot more people coming to these little
Right,
meetings of ours.
and if this motion doesn't pass, I would be happy to go with the loan version instead of fund.
Well, and I guess we have a motion and a second. While I think I'd rather raise the 2.5, I also am curious as to what the other numbers might be.
How much is the difference in the interest?
Spreading the interest out over 15 years instead of trying to pay it back.
I mean, haven't we asked that?
Well, my understanding is that with the loan, you're paying it back over 15 years, which allows you to keep the rate lower in these first 5 years.
But we do have the interest cost.
Whereas if we pay it up front by paying down our reserves or cash, whatever you want to call it, then you have to be at the same financial status at the end of 5 years instead of having another 10 years to pay back that loan.
At 4%, we have no loan.
That's
And
right,
at 2.5%, we're borrowing money.
into the future.
That's why I want, how much is the, oh, he's still figuring. That's why
I
you're getting
know.
the big money is to do this.
I know.
Yeah, I'm somewhat more inclined that we would end up only raising it by the 2.5%, but I kind of want that option to.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Understand.
It looks like the loan might be the smart way to go, but let's see.
Well, so maybe we could get a lower interest loan.
I don't want to raise the rates, but at the same time, we just talked about how much, when we were looking at the financials, we were talking about how much debt the city's carrying. It was like, what was it, 31 million? And now we're talking about assuming more debt so that we don't have to raise rates, and that's concerning as well, so.
It's a
I'm
big concern.
Yes.
Boy, that can gets kicked around a lot, doesn't it?
It does. Sometimes you have to stop kicking the can.
Well, stopping kicking the can means we have to suck it up and actually pay some money or shut something down.
But you can't keep borrowing money you don't have either.
No. Well, but that's the balance point. Is it smarter to borrow the money and spread that out over 15 years or increase the rates over 5 years? And then maybe in the next go around, instead of a 4% increase, it could be a no increase, or it could be 1%, it could be a whole nother ballgame.
It almost always ends up being an increase again.
Well, I guess that's what I look at, that in year 6, the next council will be looking at, well,
We have 10 more
the
years.
widget blew up at the.
But I seem to recall, in the last series of rate increases, I seem to recall something like 5% a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was more,
Yeah,
definitely. For water, you mean?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're lowering the curve a little bit, I think. And it's conceivable that after this 5-year period, it might be less than 2% or 4% or
Yeah.
whatever that
Do
was.
you have a number yet?
It's about 400,000, the total.
Oh, in the end?
Yeah,
How much is it?
400,000. The total payments. would be
So
about-
if you went to $4 in not taking out the loan, you would save
400,000.
400,000.
Over
It's 4%, not $4.
Yeah.
Over 15 years.
Okay.
So for the next 5 years, the inflation rate would be 1.5% higher than if we took a loan. But over the long run, we're going to, the ratepayer is still going to pay for it. The city's going to save money on interest, is what it comes down to.
Well, the ratepayers would.
Well, no, because they're paying that higher interest.
No,
rate.
no.
They're paying the.
No, I'm talking about if we don't get a loan, then we'd be saving the ratepayers that
No.
100,000.
No. They're not gonna see it. They're gonna be paying
No.
4% increase instead of 2.5%. So they're not really gonna see that 400,000. The city's gonna see it. We're gonna wind up paying out less money on interest. But
Which
the
gets
rate-
passed on to the consumer.
If we lowered the rates at some point in time, but it looks like if we go that way, we're looking at 5 years at a higher rate increase per year. After the 5 years, it may go down because of what we've done. But that's all I'm saying, is that correct? I mean,
Yeah, definitely. When you borrow, you're deferring some cost out into the future for future people to pay. I'm estimating around 200,000 in interest. I've left my financial calculator sitting on my desk,
That sounds right.
unfortunately. But, it's 3%, 15 years, 800,000. I think it's more about 200,000.
I lost my internet, sorry.
What did you say?
I lost my internet, I can't get.
Oh, you
to
lost
it.
your internet?
okay, but I think,
Yeah.
however the numbers are, the two choices are, we take the loan, impose a 2.5% increase for 5 years, and we may or may not have to do some increase in the next 5 years, sometime in the future, based on the fact that we have the loan that's paying off the stuff, and we've already figured that out, and it's amortized, the payoff. Or we don't take the loan, and we raise the rates by 4% for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, the rate increase might be less because, all of this $800 expenses is gonna be gone. I'm getting a little confused here.
That's right. You want to jump in?
So you would include those two options, you would explain that what this cap allows us to cover all those capital costs over the 5-year of the rate
Yes.
period. If the city decides to take out a loan, they could amortize that over 15 years and then reduce that amount so that the rate would, then we, at the end of the 45 days and we have a public hearing, people can come in and say, what the.
Adrian wants to.
Chime in. So if we approved the 218 notices tonight, when would they go out?
We would draft up the notice and get that back to the city to review, and the mailing list has to be secured from the county, it's all the property owners in the county. So probably 2 weeks.
Okay. So theoretically, we could would we mail these out separate from the water bills or put them in the water bills?
You can put them in the water bills, yeah.
Wouldn't they be separate since they are water and sewer?
Both. Probably should go.
You need to make sure they go to every parcel, so.
Yeah, probably separate,
Okay.
because we have some people that have wells.
So I would think that we could do some preliminary legwork with getting the addresses from the county. And if we continue this matter to the next meeting on May 24th with the idea that the notices would go out around June 1st, not in our water bills, but separately, then the clock starts ticking, and around July 15th is when the 45-day ends. We hold a public hearing, whether it's at a special meeting on the 19th or at our regular meeting on the 26th, and then we can get the county the information by August 1st. Is that reasonable?
Yes. Oh, I need to check with the county, because I know I have to have the information to them by August 1st. Typically, I try to do it, a little in advance.
So if we did a special meeting on July 19th, that gives a couple of weeks. So I would suggest that we do continue this to the next meeting on the 24th so that we can get some actual calculations before you guys approve.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Do we just continue this till then? How does this work?
Can we rescind the motion?
Well, you're gonna want Doug's firm to go ahead and prepare the draft notices so that they're ready to go at your next meeting, right? So I would think that you go ahead after you have public comment and vote on this, and if the majority agrees, we direct Doug to prepare the notices and direct staff to do the legwork so that you're ready to mail them out at your next meeting.
But he would technically have two notices, right? Two versions?
Right, I think the property owners have to have two separate notices. They might object to one, protest one, and not protest the other. I think isn't that right, Doug? You're not gonna put all of this on a single notice.
Yeah, I mean, we could usually combine them.
Oh,
No, I guess what I'm saying is depending on what they come back with, we may be saying 2.5% versus 4%.
Right.
I guess that's what I was getting at. Or are we, am I reading this correctly? And the reason we're having you wait to come back and give us the information is so that we have more information.
I think the 218, correct me if I'm wrong, 218 is, we're sending out saying this is the maximum that we will be able to raise
Okay.
your rates over the next 5 years. And there's going to be a public hearing on this date, please come. That's my understanding and my,
And that's mostly a notice for people to come out and participate and protest if they want to.
correct,
That's not necessarily the numbers that we're going to use.
correct.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Do we still have to have, like last time, do we still have to have a petition of 51% of the people in the city to say that we don't want this for it not to happen?
Yes. You have to get protests equal to.
But I mean, people coming to
50%.
the meeting is not going to do it. You have to actually have one on a piece of paper
Correct.
presented to the council saying, we, the undersigned, don't want this to happen. That's the way it was last time, or I...
Yes.
50%
Yeah.
of all the
So it's a
property.
protest vote. You need 51% to say we don't want that.
Right.
50% plus one.
Yeah,
Right. Oh, okay.
of our electorate, but now, we have a lot of water customers that aren't in the city. Do they have a say at all or not?
I think it's the
No.
ratepayers, not
The
the,
rate-
Last time
ratepayers.
we didn't.
What's it?
Just the
If they're
city.
ratepayers, they would
Yeah.
have a say.
yeah.
So somebody getting water on Della, who isn't in the city, they are a ratepayer, right? So they're,
Yeah,
Yeah, I would include them.
okay.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure what the exact legal interpretation is on that.
Well, they're paying for it.
Okay.
What about our wastewater clients in Brook Trails, et cetera?
No,
I don't
they're
believe this is
served
a
by
thing.
contract.
Okay, so
With
that's
Brook
covered,
Trails.
that's separate,
So
okay.
they
So,
don't
okay,
get
so
those.
at this point, we have a motion, a second, and the idea is that we would be directing you to draw up the notices, but you obviously wouldn't send them till our next meeting then. So, all right.
All right.
Kathy, roll call.
We'll have public comment.
Oh, thank you. Public comment. Would anybody from the public like to talk about this? Okay.
Come on,
Thank you.
public.
They'll be back.
You'll be
Unless
back,
one-
yeah.
All right. Okay, hearing none, now, roll call.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes?
Ornstein?
Yeah.
Stransky?
No.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We eagerly await your information.
That was fun. Thanks very much.
Does anybody need a break, or do we continue?
I'm good.
I think,
All right. All right. Presentation by the Broadband Alliance in Mendocino County regarding the draft county broadband goals and strategies.
we made them wait a long
So
time.
we have Trish Steele here from the Broadband Alliance.
Sorry to make you wait so long.
No, that's okay. So, I actually,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, that's it. Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members.
That's for the home
Okay.
audience. It
So,
doesn't-
so you can hear me fine?
yeah.
So anyway, thank you for this opportunity to be here. This will be easy listening after your two financial presentations.
So my name is Trish Steele, and I wear a couple of different broadband hats. So what I thought would be good is to clarify the different groups, broadband groups that I'll mention in the presentation. I think it'll make it easier for you to kind of understand. So I'm the chair of the Executive Committee of the Broadband Alliance. I hope you've heard of the Broadband Alliance. We are a grassroots advocacy group, and we've been in existence since 2010. We actually have roots that go back to 2007 with a coastal broadband group called the Mendocino Coast Broadband Alliance. But they wanted to expand and become a countywide organization, so they formed a collaborative partnership with EDFC, the Economic Development and Financing Corporation, the Community Foundation, and the Executive Office to form the Broadband Alliance. And our mission is, you know, to advocate for affordable universal broadband access to all of our residents. And we have a very strong public outreach. Supervisor Hamburg is on the executive committee. You know, right now we have 5 members on the executive committee, and they kind of guide the work. And we have a website called mendocinobroadband.org, and I have a lot of information posted on the website. I hope you'll get a chance to maybe check it out. And I try and keep the content relevant, and I'll be referring to the website as we go along the presentation. So there's another organization called the North Bay North Coast Broadband Consortium, and I realize there's a typo. That's not supposed to be alliance, that's supposed to be consortium. And this is a 4-county regional planning consortium funded by the California Public Utilities, and that's Mendocino, Sonoma, Napa, and Marin County. And the consortium is organized with an oversight committee composed of a supervisor from each of the 4 counties, and for our county, that's Supervisor Hamburg. And we have a portion underneath on the Broadband Alliance website. The second menu is North Bay North Coast, and under that menu I post our work plans, our quarterly reports, our newsletters, and everything related to the consortium from Mendocino County is posted at that spot. We were funded in 2014 and 15, but then we were not in 2016, and now we are again in 2017 and 18. And for each of those years, we have a work plan that we're following. And kind of as the liaison for Mendocino County, I'm responsible for trying to make sure that Mendocino stays on track with their work plans. So then there's a third group called the Broadband Working Group. So I pulled this group together in 2016 to represent county interests, because the alliance is kind of grassroots. The consortium is a regional planning group. And so I wanted to get input from county agencies such as education, public safety, and city governments, and yet have a small enough group that we can get work done. So we currently have a 9-member broadband working group. And the 3 goals for the working group, and this is part of the work plans for the consortium, the 3 goals are to draft a broadband goals and strategies document, which we've done and which is in your packet, and then to draft a conceptual infrastructure map for the county, and then to draft a broadband plan. And what we hope to do is bring the goals before the Board of Supervisors in July, and then, you know, at a later date, bring the broadband plan before the Board of Supervisors and get that approved. So the goals and strategies document, what is the purpose of this? Why are we going through this? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. We want to get people talking broadband. We want to elevate the broadband conversation, because broadband is so important for all aspects of life in the county these days, and we want to get people talking about it. We think it would be useful as a county guide and to encourage broadband leadership. And then finally, the goals and infrastructure design will be the foundation for our broadband plan. And I guess you could sum up the purpose of all of this in terms of economic development. There's a strong link between broadband and economic development. There's been lots of studies, and more studies all the time are showing how strong that relationship is. I was recently in Sacramento at a California Broadband Council meeting. There was a new study out by a researcher in Riverside. It's not public yet, but he talked about how with every megabit per second increase in speed, there's a direct correlation with the GDP. So I think economic development is just really important, when we're talking about broadband. And then I also want to bring up there was a report that was issued in 2016 by the Consumer Federation of America, and it was talking about business data services. And these are the special access that businesses have for connectivity. And what this group found was that this is a huge market. It's $40 billion a year, and it's practically the market is dominated by very few providers, and that 50% of the charges that businesses pay for their connectivity are overcharges. So that means $20 billion of those fees are basically excess profits to the incumbents, and that costs our economy, and basically those costs are passed on to the consumers. So it's worth paying attention to broadband, because ultimately we all pay the cost. And one of the purposes in elevating the broadband conversation is, and asking counties and cities to take leadership, is just to do a self-assessment, to look at your community and be a little proactive. If you just let providers provide what they will, they're going to provide on their own terms. But if you kind of do your own self-assessment and you say, what are our needs? Are our needs being met? And if they're not, if you're being proactive, if you're talking to providers and saying, hey, we have this kind of unmet need. We need better connectivity for our hospitals or for our schools. And just being proactive, you're more likely to get better services. And if the providers won't engage with you, then you could start considering alternatives and what are other options out there. One thing cities can do is look, how much are we paying for our connectivity every month? And cities actually have more leverage than they realize. It doesn't necessarily mean shelling out money, but you can leverage things like rights of way and policies, and it's really encouraging to see Willits actually being proactive in that with their Main Street project. But there's things you could leverage, and even demand aggregation. If you look at how much you're paying every month for your broadband connectivity, you can leverage that and bring it to the table, a commitment for services. And sometimes just even the threat of competition can bring better services from your incumbent provider. And you may decide you're happy with what your provider is offering, and that's fine, but it's good to make a decision by being proactive instead of a decision by indecision. And I'd also encourage you to go on our website, and under projects, I have a link called Fiber Networks and Economic Development. And there's a video from a conservative town in Idaho called Ammon, Idaho. And it's about the size of Ukiah. And they built their network, and they actually won an award from the Department of Justice for this application that they developed. And they could only develop it because they had high-speed internet. But it's an application for, in the horrible, horrible situation of a school shooting, they developed this application that could save lives. And it's very interesting from a public safety standpoint, because I think sometimes we don't realize the potential of high-speed broadband, when you don't have it. And so this little 15-minute video gives you an idea of the potential for high-speed broadband for some of these applications. And it's worthwhile to think, look at your city and say, who's using broadband? What are the applications? What are the potential applications? Water sensors. In a drought year, what's the economic value by having water sensors so people can monitor their usage? What's the economic value, when businesses have to move because they can't get the broadband? And as part of the Broadband Alliance, I hear on a pretty regular basis businesses actually moving out of the county because they can't get broadband. So that's a little something about leadership. I'm going to go through the rest of this really fast. You guys have been sitting a long time already. So the goals and strategies documents, I have 5 big goals, and they're non-controversial. They're just basic goals. Each goal has strategies to help reach the goal. The document is a draft one until it gets adopted by the Board of Supervisors. It's completely in accord with our current county legislative platform. I do have the text if anyone wants to see the actual text of our legislative platform that relates to broadband. But the legislative text talks about universal service and working with the Alliance. So there's nothing that contradicts the platform. And what I'm doing is I'm going around talking broadband to city councils, MACs. I was at the Fire Chiefs Association this morning, and I'm trying to get support for the goals and strategies document so that when I go before the Board of Supervisors, I can say, hey, there's widespread support for this throughout the county. And it's also an opportunity for you to give input while it's still in draft form. So you may look at it and think, oh, I think, something else should be a goal, or you're missing a strategy, and we'd welcome that input. So I'm not going to, like I said, read through everything because you have it there in front of you. The first goal is just essential telecommunications are reliable and redundant. We know why that's important because we've experienced what happens when it's not. One of the strategies to reach that goal is to get involved in proceedings before the PUC, and actually after the outage in 2014, the Board of Supervisors wanted to get involved. They came and they said, what can we do? And I kind of researched it, and I said, well, there's a proceeding before the PUC that deals with outage reporting and loss of dial tone and loss of 911. We could get involved. So we petitioned, became a party to that proceeding, and we actually won a victory in December 2016 in a decision. And this decision has to do with outage reporting for public safety, and it was able to do what Senator McGuire couldn't do with his Senate Bill 1549 about public safety reporting. So it was a huge victory, and it's still standing, but the carriers have petitioned to have a rehearing, so we'll see. But it's now moving into phase 2, and it's including public safety to be involved with a working group, and Sheriff Allman has agreed to participate in it. So that's an example of how we can help get better reliability. And then AT&T upgraded their network on the North Coast, and although I can't say the kind of the squeaky wheel that we were about these outages caused them to upgrade, I think it definitely does influence the providers when you document the outages and when you become involved and proactive. So the second goal then is county residents have affordable high-speed broadband access in their homes, and we defined affordable high-speed access as aligning it with the California definition. The definition of broadband is a moving target. The feds will define it differently than the state, but we just align it with the state definition. That way, if the state definition changes, then we can change it with it, and it won't get outdated. The third goal. Third goal is competitively priced broadband infrastructure throughout the county is developed to attract, retain, and develop internet-reliant businesses. So this is kind of just the business side of it, that businesses will have different needs than residents. The fourth goal is county and cities take leadership in broadband issues, adopt policies to facilitate deployments, and find ways to leverage existing assets. And remember, this is just a goal. It doesn't, you can support these goals without feeling like you have to do anything or commit any resources. These are goals. These are goals only. And then the fifth goal is we develop a countywide comprehensive plan by 2019. I'd love to have it done in 2018. But another reason why I'm here is I want to try and get input on a county broadband plan. I'd like to get input from each county. From each city. What are your needs? Have some say in the broadband plan, because it's kind of a huge undertaking to think about coming up with a plan. We did have a plan in 2012 that was developed by the Alliance, but it relied on a project, a middle mile project called Golden Bear Broadband. Maybe some of you guys have heard it. It was never funded, and so that plan is completely out of date, and so I thought we needed to update it. So in summary, there's a strong link between economic development and broadband. I hope to get these goals endorsed at the county level, and I'm looking for endorsements from various groups such as city councils and MACs and other, public safety groups and education. It would be a benefit for our county CEO and city managers and others to have clear broadband goals for the county, cities, and communities, and it will be the foundation for our plan. And I'm just asking you to consider, show support by supporting the goals, and it's a chance to give input too, because it's still in draft form. And then just want to finish this with a quote, broadband is a great infrastructure challenge of the early 21st century, and that's from the FCC broadband plan. And, currently we have a mishmash of technology and providers and a lot of gaps in our broadband. Some people can get fiber for, $40 a month if you live in an area, at a 1 gig. And other people are like myself are paying, over $100 and, getting, 4 megs down. So, and some people can't get anything. So just encourage you to talk broadband, keep it in mind, and I'd be happy to come back, talk about anything, or you can leave a business card if you have any questions, anything like that.
Trish, thank you for bringing this up. Do you think you have like a model resolution that we could?
Yes, I was actually at Fort Bragg, and they asked the same thing. I do have little endorsement forms too, but they asked, well, we'd rather do a resolution. Do you have a template? And I said, well, give me the weekend. I'll come up with a template and send it to you next week or something. And so I can do the same for
You
you.
can send it to Kathy, and then we can look at it
Okay.
that way. And thank you for all the work. I remember testifying in front of the PUC.
Yes, that's right. You were there. That was part of the roll call completion, and that was that we got. And that public participation and all the public safety that were there was a big part. We got the victory. So I want to thank you because that was really important. So.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're at item 4, consent calendar.
I would like to pull C and D for a quick question.
All right. So, I guess, do I have a motion on items A and B?
I'll move.
Second. All right. Any further comment? Anybody from the public? Roll call vote.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes?
Orenstein?
Yeah.
Strand?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. All right, item C.
Okay, so item C is the animal control agreements for 2016-17 and 2017-18. And 2017 is going to be over like a month and a half. Why are we signing this now?
Because this was brought to us in December, and you had raised some questions about it. So we contacted the county about the,
What was the question?
The form of the contract was
Right.
backward. It was
That's
as if
right,
the
that's
city
right.
was contracting to perform services for the
Okay,
county.
but even that, it was kind of late. I mean, is that?
it was, it indeed was.
We approached them, if I remember right, the year before,
Yeah.
and they were reworking things.
Okay. So if we don't approve the 16-17 contract, that means we don't pay them for the services they've given us for 10 months? Just asking. Okay. On item D.
Well, let's vote on
Do you want to
C.
do that? Okay.
Yeah, let's take care of C. Do I have any further discussion on C?
No, that
All
was
right.
the only question I had.
All right, do I have a motion on C?
Move approval.
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. Anybody from the public? All right. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay, now D.
Okay, D, so this is an agreement with the Willits Trust, and it's just a little slight thing. It's one of those little dinky things that, who cares? Because we're gonna get the check anyway, I'm sure. But on page 2, paragraph 2A, the payment, and there is a sentence that said the unpaid balance will pay a fee of 0.03288% per diem. That's not a lot. And I'm wondering, why is that even in there? I mean, that's like nothing.
Well, that's in there, I guess, because if you approve execution of this agreement, it's already been approved by all of the other entities, and we finalized the agreement by signing it tonight.
Okay.
We give the trust notice, the city council approved it, send us the check, and then they don't. There is some interest that is going to accrue for their untimely payment.
So I guess my other related question is that correct? I mean, 0.03288 is 0.03%. Now, should that be 3.288%?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. The Pepsi's lawyer and Stuart Block were principally involved in the preparation of this document.
Yeah.
And so maybe there was a mathematical error in that
Yeah.
percentage. But at this point, I really would not like to try and go back to all the other parties and ask if they would agree to modifying this agreement that they've already signed over that kind of an issue.
And it's per diem, not per, yeah, which is not per.
I mean, it's
year.
hardly even worth putting it in there.
But if you multiply that by 365, maybe it's actually
1%. Then they get down to that.
something, you know.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
But you know, I think the bigger issue that I expected you to ask questions about is this a good deal? Is this a good amount of money? Is this a reasonable amount of money? And I think that it is, and
That's why I didn't ask the question, because I figured it was. I mean, we've discussed this in the past, you know, and actually, as I recall, we actually discussed this a couple of months ago about closing the account out.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, this was all fine. There was nothing new that I saw. My eye just went to this weird number. And, you know, numbers are numbers, you know? I mean, if it doesn't mean anything, why put it there? But anyway, I'm good.
Anybody else have anything on this? Mitch?
I'll move approval.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Motion to second? All right. And all those, any further discussion? All right. Anybody from the public? All right, all those in favor? Aye. I'm getting tired, so.
Yeah.
So Jerry's going to need to
I think
sign.
we're,
All right. All right, so information reports, and we've got a couple there. Building inspection activity, business license, solid waste, and it should be noted that they were supposed to have been providing these, they finally did. And Willits, City of Willits sales tax forecast. Did you have anything you want to add on that, or?
I think it's pretty clear, but I'm happy to talk about them if you want me to. You can see that, I forgot the color.
yeah, I know it's fantastic.
Now you go up to the
You
side.
can't-
Actually, I think I have it right here. You can see that they're anticipating that we'll receive $1,479,000 this year in sales tax revenue over last year. That's about $100,000 decrease. And next year, they're anticipating a $240,000 decrease more from this year. So I think this comes at a really critical time right before we go in to talk about budget, because there's never enough, but there's never enough money either. And when you look at not only the sales tax, but also the half-cent sales tax, which is only on fuel, or, you know, that we use towards streets, that's going down as well, and a considerable, you know, $100,000, and then another $100,000 over the next couple of years. So it's a considerable hit that we're gonna take, and I just think that we should keep that in mind as we look into other revenue streams.
So, you know, in the past, we've always had this kind of forecast.
From Muni Services?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a number. And as it's turned out, is that for many of the years, the revenue has actually exceeded what their estimate was. You know, I think it's important that we stay very conservative and not bank on something that is wishful thinking. But do you have a sense of, you know, maybe it might be better than what they're projecting?
I don't.
Okay.
And simply because of the numbers that I presented at the last council meeting, where we were looking at revenues lost. And I did a year, and I've asked for it quarter over quarter now, so that we can see what the loss was this quarter over a quarter a year ago. But the loss in revenues is going to be a dramatic hit.
So,
to our sales.
what would explain the increase going over the next, you know, 7 years from 18 through 23, where the increase, you know, the revenue starts to increase? Why would that happen?
Well, because we drop, and then there's going to be the cost of living that's going to, if nothing else, will sustain.
Oh, you mean
us.
just the cost of items will increase, so the revenue will increase.
So this is all in constant current day dollars.
Right.
But forecasting for a certain amount of inflation, correct?
Correct.
So we'll probably discuss this a little more at the budget.
We will discuss this a lot.
Definitely.
Can you explain where I see this? There is two categories of taxes, and I'm not seeing it. Well, I see it now. Maybe I imagined it.
The Bradley Burns and the Prop 172?
Yeah, that, and the other one was something GAN, was it?
GAN, the GAN initiative. The GAN initiative, that stems from Proposition 13, where now it's like a history lesson, and hopefully I get my dates right, but going back to Prop 13, they set a date and time, I believe it was 1979, that we couldn't increase our revenues
By more than 1%.
by more than 1% per year. We are so far under that.
That's the GAN limit, right?
Right. I think, well, you can see what our GAN limit is. It's the little gray, and the blue is what we can go up to. So we have a lot of room there, but that's what that is. Saying if we had increased 1% per year, or there's also another caveat in there where you can take.
Okay, but I was just curious about when I
That's
saw
what it is.
that I don't see now, so I don't know. I guess I was dreaming.
It's at the bottom.
We have some staff that's had long days. Would you be okay, Ron, if we discussed it more at the budget meeting?
Well, you don't want to sit here and,
Yeah, I think,
sorry.
So,
Staff and
Thank you
council
for
members.
pulling me in.
yeah.
Oh, I
Okay.
see. Yeah, Bradley Burns and
Yeah.
Prop 172, okay.
So Ron, I'm going to move on to
Yeah.
item 6, and then we'll take a break.
You made your day.
This is all right. So right to appeal, persons who are dissatisfied with the decision, city council may have the right to review that decision by the court. The city has adopted section 1094.6 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which generally limits to 90 days the time within which the decisions of the city boards and agencies may be judicially challenged. And how about we take a 5-minute break?
Oh, good idea.
Come back. Agencies and authorities. The Willits Council meets concurrently as the City of Willits Planning Commission and the City of Willits Successor Agency, and there are no items under item 7, so we're now at item 8, City Manager reports and recommendations.
Thank you. Well, first I wanted to report that I received a call from Ruth Valenzuela this morning, who is Assemblymember Woods District Rep, and she informed me that Ukiah is now being hit with the same ADA lawsuits. 2 businesses so far. It's the same plaintiff and same attorney. The Chamber of Commerce down there is going to be hosting an educational workshop similar to what we did. I didn't get the email from her, but I believe she said July 2nd or 6th, so I'll confirm that with you. It will be held in Ukiah, but we certainly want to encourage all of our businesses to attend that. The presenter will be an ADA attorney, whereas we had a CASP inspector here, so that'll be a good complement to what we learned with in our presentation. In addition, I've mentioned before, I sit on the West Company Board, and I've been engaged in some discussions with the county and with EDFC about the future of economic development and what the best model would be going forward. And our representative is Sabrina, so I've kept her apprised of that, and also spoken with Madge about it since she's sat on that board for a couple of years. So stay tuned for more information on that. Then if I could just jump into the Public Works and Water and Wastewater, since we don't have staff here on those items. What I passed out to you is a memo from Bill Wilson to myself regarding the city park and basically an update on what's going on at City Park. So we've been removing trees because they pose safety hazards. Tree removal will continue at the rate of about 2 trees a week, ongoing over the next month. After that, Public Works will be doing ground prep, which will take approximately 1 week. And the plan is to make irrigation improvements and repairs. And Bill is awaiting the estimates from 2 irrigation companies on that. He's hoping that he can save some of the existing irrigation and not have to replace everything. Planting new trees, we will be planting 24 more trees. We took care of the ones in the center, and now these are on the perimeter. And so those will be the larger trees in the 24-inch boxes. PG&E, who had previously given us a grant of $2,500 for trees, will be purchasing 3 more trees for us. And then we have a tentative date on June 2nd, likely in the morning, to have a tree planting ceremony with PG&E there to recognize their contributions and do a little PR around that. And then we're looking at lighting improvements, and we're discussing options with PG&E. And so specifically, what we're talking about with them is with the lighting, the light bulb retrofitting that will be taking place over the next couple of months throughout the city, the cost savings that we're going to realize on those bills, we would then in turn utilize some of that savings towards some light upgrades at City Park. Actual fixtures, not just the bulb. And then we are working with PG&E to underground the power to the restrooms. So this isn't the full undergrounding of, around the park. This would be the pole that is on Marin Street that feeds into the restrooms. So all of those things we hope to accomplish by the end of this fiscal year, and then slated for next fiscal year, depending on, how the budget goes. We are slating ADA improvements to the restrooms. We don't currently have ADA restrooms, and so we would be losing a stall in each in order to have an ADA accessible stall. And we would also be painting and doing some lighting upgrades in those restrooms. And jumping back to the trees, a couple of people, including Councilmember Stransky, have asked about the spacing of the trees and where the trees would be planted in relation to where they are now with regard to the power lines. So the trees are going to be brought in towards the park a bit so that it lessens the conflict with the power lines. And we're just really talking about Marin Street. I have a diagram in here.
State Street and Humboldt.
Well, there's only 4 trees on Marin Street, and that's where the...
And those are already in. So the other ones that are being planted are going to come in a bit further. We're also not putting as many in, so they're going to be spaced farther apart, which will improve the canopy growth.
On the Humboldt Street side, it looks like there's not going to be any trees there, and that's the ones that have been interfered, that have been cut back, for the wires.
No, those are the ones on State Street. The ones on Humboldt Street are the newest trees, with the exception of the center trees.
Okay, because they're not showing trees on this map.
Because they're already there.
Okay, but I remember 10, 12 years ago, whatever, those things were really butchered because they had been planted and pruned incorrectly, and that's why a lot of the new trees were put in.
Yes.
So the trees that are there will not interfere with the wires?
Correct.
Is that,
That's what I'm told.
okay.
So that's the update on that. Unless there are any further questions?
I have a question about that. In the center, where one of the trees were taken out, there's like a indentation in the ground there, and they've got it taped off around it. Do you know what the plan is?
to fix that? Right now, if you were a child out there playing, it's taped off, but the ground is sunken in.
Mhm.
Where they removed the tree is,
I think that's probably the case. So part of the ground prep is the overall park. We're planning to, level things off, put new irrigation in, and I don't recall offhand what the plan is for the grass, if it's going to be sod or what, but basically improving the grounds overall. And so that indentation will no longer be there.
do you think that that'll take another month? It'll be in the month of June, or
I'll check on that.
will
I
that
don't
all
know.
be done by the 4th of July?
We're hoping to. Yeah, that's the goal.
John?
The reason that hole is still out in the center is that the ground has been too soft to put equipment on it to regrade. We're just starting, it's just starting to firm up enough to put a grader
Thank you.
Another question, when you were talking about the improvements to the restroom, is there going to be any special treatment of that? I mean, my understanding is that the restroom has always been problematic, and it's been closed a lot because of vandalism. Is there any plans to do anything about that?
Yes. So part of that is the undergrounding of the power, so there's no damage to that. Improving the lighting inside and putting some timers in so that the lights, nobody has to go in and tend to those lights. They'll be on a timer and provide better security. So I don't have the specifics on that yet.
Yeah. But are there any, I know that there's a lot of public bathrooms in all over the country, and they come with some sort of devices that can wash out the whole building, that kind of thing.
For cleaning?
For cleaning, yeah, and for, I don't know.
I think they have them in San Francisco and New York, those self-contained units that basically spritz after use.
Okay, we have not looked at those.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just wondering if that's one of the issues from what I've been hearing. I've never gone in those bathrooms personally.
I think they're pretty pricey, though.
Yeah.
Really what we need is for the community to do their part.
Yeah.
And keep them, care for them. Our guys are in there every day cleaning and stocking. We have some similar issues at our restrooms here at City Hall. There are just people that come in and trash them and steal the supplies. So that's a hard thing to eliminate.
Yeah.
Having a business across the street, though, I have to say I'm impressed with the number of times that the Willits Police Department employees stop by to check on the restroom facilities. They're over there, some nights they're over there every hour, making sure that anybody in the park is safe and that the restrooms aren't being vandalized.
Okay, so the next item is a report on our testing results for the water system. And so you have 2 pages. The first page represents the TTHMs, the total trihalomethanes. And then the second page represents the halocetic acids, the HAA5. And so what I want to call your attention to is the second set of numbers, reading from top down. In blue, so this represents 2015 when we exceeded the maximum limits, contaminant limits, and you'll see that at Walker Road, for example, it was 95.13. And we have continually improved on that number over the last 2 years, and currently it's at 32.91. So drastic improvement. And then on the next page, looking at the same set of numbers with regard to the HAA5, we were at 58.13 in 2015 at Walker Road, which was exceeding the limits. And today we're at 16.83.
And those numbers are an average of the 4 quarters?
Yes. And so I wanted to bring this to your attention. I've been reporting to you that we have continued to have a decrease in our numbers, which is what we want to see. But I wanted to show you the actual numbers so you could see for yourself. The staff up there have just, the operators and Scott Herman as our utility superintendent have just done a tremendous job in improving our results. And that's all I have for my reports.
Are those the only 2 sampling sites that we do? Or those are just the ones?
No,
that
there are
we-
several, but those were the 2 that were problematic.
Adrian?
Yes. So moving on to the next item, 8B, our off-agenda item. As I briefly mentioned earlier, not unexpectedly, our president promised to make cuts to CDBG funding, Community Development Block Grant Program. So the Housing and Community Development Agency is making those, proposing those cuts, which would be 50% of the funding and completely eliminating technical assistance. The city of Willits does not currently receive any of the funding, but we have been gearing up with our housing element update to be in line, to be eligible again to receive that funding. And so we're proposing a letter of opposition to these cuts, not only for our future funding opportunities, but throughout the county and really throughout the state. So I'm simply seeking approval to have our mayor sign this letter of opposition and transmit it to Senator McGuire, with copies going to Jim Wood and Cecilia Aguirre-Curry.
Aren't these at the federal level, so wouldn't we be also CCing our senators and our congressperson and?
We could do that.
Yeah. And the HCD as well. Because the state is kind of at their mercy. It's happening from the top down.
I'll move that we send a letter.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. All right. Administration, city clerk,
Nothing tonight, thank you.
finance, anything more?
I said no earlier, but I did think of one thing. We just sent our closeout letter to the FAA to close out our first grant for the airport layout plan, so, finance department has been busy.
Okay. I don't see anybody from Human Resources. Jim, you said you didn't have anything?
That's correct.
All right. Public Safety, Chief?
I have nothing.
Community Development?
Good evening. It's getting busy. The sun came out and everybody's seems to be on go and let's get something done. Building permit activity has continued to pick up. I'm really happy to see that. Rodeo grounds, a lot of progress made. We've got all of the concrete work done for the grandstand extensions and the ramps, et cetera, and we're, I think Friday morning, we're gonna make another pour and get about half of the accessible path done. So that's moving really well, and I have to say that, once again, the Frontier Days people have really stepped up, and the organized effort has really come together, and I'm pretty proud to be working with them. They're getting a lot done. ADA compliance continues to be a concern to local business owners, and many are having their facilities surveyed and have basically jumped into getting the corrections made. And I think we hear a lot about this. What I want to say, though, is that our business community is really stepping up, and not just the people that have been threatened. not just the people that have litigation, but across the board. I think it says a lot about our business community, that they want to be open and they want to be accessible to people with disabilities. There been a little bit of time where we didn't really know what we needed to do, but that's coming together pretty quickly as well. City Hall, the east entry here is probably going to be about 2 weeks before we start, but the east entry will be closed for at least a week, where we pull the entry out and replace it with new concrete ramps so that we have a legal and compliant entrance there. We're also going to be revising the parking lot layout, reversing the direction of that parking lot. We'll be sealing and restriping and putting new parking bumpers in there.
John, can I ask you, on the front, on the entry there, does it have to have some kind of button that can open the doors for someone?
It already has one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
So it's the
contrary to some people's belief, it works. It works just fine.
Okay.
Unfortunately, sometimes when people rent the community center, they don't think about it. They reach up there and they turn it off for whatever reason, and it never occurs to them to turn it back on. And honestly, we should be checking that constantly, but it's one of those things that falls through until I realize, oh yeah, it's off.
You think we should put a sign that says, don't turn off or something, like
We're on the rental application checklist.
You know, we had a tenant actually get up there and disconnect the electrical supply. If you'll notice, it's plugged in with an electric extension cord right now until we get the time. Bill's running really shorthanded, and so, you know, if we can keep it working this way until he gets some time, that's what it'll take, but.
hopefully we charge them a fee or something for.
Well, unfortunately, we didn't know exactly who it was, but it did happen during a period of time when there was a lot of decorating happening in the community center, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it. The tennis courts, later this month, we'll begin the repairs to the tennis courts. The old backboard has been demolished by students at Willits High School, and they're actually talking to me about putting the new one together and installing it. So I think it's great to get the kids to have a buy-in there. It's a facility that they're going to be using a lot, and it's nice to know that they think this is their community too.
Are you going to be resurfacing the surface?
Well, what we're doing is cutting out the existing cracks and backfilling those cracks, and then the school district will be resealing and restriping it. The school district and the city are partners on this project.
Yeah, I remember that. So will that be done this year, do you think? The resurfacing?
Later this month.
Oh, cool. I know
Yeah,
a few
we're
people
just
are-
putting the final schedule together right now, and we just got the concrete bid for the side work, and it's a little higher than I expected, but it's a little more complicated than I thought it would be too. Kudos to Jeremy Ronco. Jeremy designed this whole thing out here, and it is pretty complex because we've got ramps going in different directions and they're meeting in the same place, so.
And the lights are fixed, right? That happened already?
The lights?
At the tennis courts?
Tennis court lights.
I think you jumped
Yeah.
back to the parking lot, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, so let me ask the question.
Yeah, the school district has taken upon themselves to fix the lights at the tennis courts.
Okay, has that been done yet, or, I thought?
All but 2 lights, and 2 lights are waiting for parts.
Okay, and we're again talking about the tennis court surface, which is gonna be done this month?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the swimming pool, the locker rooms, the restrooms, the office, all of that's being refinished inside and out, a new roof on the building at the swimming pool, and we're getting ready to start the summer swim program. June 1st, the school district will be handing control of the swimming pool back over to us for our summer swim program. Let's see. And one thing I wanted to mention, Chief McGann is on vacation. He's taking some final vacation time before he ends his career in retirement here. But I do want to mention to the public, this last winter, we've had a hell of a lot of rain, and we've got an awful big load of grass. It's starting to turn brown really quickly. And I really would just like to ask property owners out there to be proactive about this. Get out there and get that cut before it's a fire danger, before we have to do it in some other manner. So I'm just appealing to the property owners. Please take a look at your properties, and if it warrants trimming, get it done before the grass gets brown. So, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Dusty?
Good evening, Mayor Gonzalez, council members, Dusty Dooley, city planner. Just a few things to update you on. Anxiously awaiting the logo signs from Caltrans to be installed on 101. Last update we received is that would happen sometime in May. We'd asked for that to be April. We're in May. I attempted to get an update for you and wasn't able to do so, but hopefully I'll get an update, or they'll be installed before our next meeting. The Revite Ed committee met and decided to set up a subcommittee to look at signage for the city of Willits. Not only a civic type billboard, but wayfinding signs and the variety of signage that we've discussed in the past. We're looking for community members to join that sign committee. So if anyone out there is listening and interested in being part of that committee and helping design and locate signs throughout the city, please give me a call or email me. We did reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and the Willits Arts Center to see if we couldn't grab some of those folks to be part of that important committee. Let's see, the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee has met no less than 5 hours in the last week. We are reviewing an administrative draft of the comprehensive cannabis ordinance, and I've been getting a lot of needed help and support in getting that completed. We're hoping to have a public forum probably sometime the week of May 22nd is my best estimate at this point. So stay tuned for that meeting. We'll certainly be getting word out once we are able to select a date and finalize a public draft of that. So I'm excited that that's moving forward.
Do you think we'll be seeing that this month?
You know, with the public forum happening the week of May 22nd, I think the council meeting maybe May 24th, that might be a little bit too quick of a turnaround. That was a goal that we had, but it's looking like that might get pushed off into June. So, yeah. And then y'all remember the City of Willits Main Street Corridor Enhancement Plan.
Heard of it.
This was a plan that was unanimously approved by the previous council back in December. This was a plan that hundreds of community members came out and helped shape. This was a plan that probably darn near every single employee at the City of Willits touched in one way or another. And I got a letter 2 days ago from the American Planning Association, the Northern California chapter, and it says, Dear Dusty, we'd like to congratulate the City of Willits on being the 2017 award winner.
Wow.
So, not San Francisco, not Oakland, not Marin, not Humboldt County, right? Not Santa Rosa, not Sonoma County. The City of Willits is has won the Award of Excellence in the category of hard-won victories.
Wow.
Hard-won victories.
Hard-won victories, yeah.
Huh.
Adrian and I are planning to go down on June 2nd to accept the award in Oakland. Obviously, the council's invited. If you'd like to attend, just let me know.
How much money is involved?
I think the tickets are like $35.
No, I mean the award.
Oh, yeah.
It's a feather.
I said, so it's in Oakland, so what do we win, like a copy of Oakland's general plan? Like, but apparently there's a trophy involved, and I know we do have a trophy case out there.
We need a trophy.
Yeah.
We need the money more than
It's not like the,
Well, that's fine. I mean, that's on the map in some way. That's
Yeah, at least in recent past, I'm not aware of a jurisdiction close to as small as we are that's won one of these awards.
So it's a hard-won victory. So what does that mean? I mean, I guess I know what it means.
I think it probably, again, sort of being the one that nominated the project, pointed to the fact that we're a small jurisdiction with limited resources, that we had a community of differing opinions, that we had come out of a long tenuous project regarding the bypass, which had led to community members having a variety of feelings and opinions on that, and sort of come out of that and to come forward with a Main Street plan that was supported unanimously by our council and was offered a lot of support from the community. And again, working with 4 different consultant groups to make that happen, probably led to us getting that hard-won victory award.
So the trophy will have a big Band-Aid on it, I assume. That's good. Congratulations.
Congratulations to the city of Willits. So that was definitely a community-wide, complete staff effort. So obviously very happy to announce that.
Your interface in presenting that, when you started reading the letter, I was afraid it was going to be like the whole thing was thrown out.
Down the toilet. Are you kidding me?
Quite the opposite. Our peers throughout the state recognize that as being an award-winning plan. So
You didn't start smiling until the end.
He's been dancing around for the last couple days.
I was holding my breath.
I just want to say how proud I am, for the city and for the community, and certainly for Dusty, who shepherded this whole process. Well done.
Yep, absolutely. There'll be a new name to Main Street.
well, there's no one from Public Works. You already spoke to that, so we're on to City Council and Committee reports. League of Cities met on May 1st. We approved the Anderson Valley Community Services activation of latent powers. The fire department is basically taking over ambulance services. I guess the way I understand it is they could have actually been doing it before, but they chose not to, and there was actually a community service district that was doing it, so they're...
Are you talking about LAFCO or League?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I apologize. League of Cities meets next week. Sorry, I apologize.
That's what they would have met if they had.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they're meeting next week in Fort Bragg, and I'll be attending. So, all right, MemCog.
MemCog, I got this for each one of you guys to look at, and it was an article that was in a magazine throughout the state, and I just thought I had Kathy run it off for us, and I just thought it was a nice article on our freeway. We're working on budget for next year and trying to come up with the best that we can. The number one thing I can say is that we're in for some real good funding, and in 3 or 4 years, our funding from MCOG will double. And so we really need to start looking at things that we want to do and to use the money to repave streets or whatever. And it's very, very important that somebody goes down on the, before the directors meet, and I've mentioned this time after time about somebody from the staff going down to the staff meeting for MCOG. And because there's going to be a lot of people there trying to get our money.
So when you say money, you're talking to Willits?
Yeah.
And MCOG?
Yeah.
So after, I thought we were kind of on some sort of a blacklist for a number of years because of the money they spent on.
Well,
bypass.
with the new taxes that's gonna happen, we're in for, the whole Mendocino County's in for some good money. And, I mean, they don't know exactly how much. This is a report that was put out by the League of California Cities, in fact. And, but the thing that interests me was that we're, over the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to just increase every year and up to double at the end.
Cool.
Well, I think also, Larry, there was talk on the federal level that the feds want to do some
Yeah.
investment in infrastructure too.
Anyhow, so these are the things that, I can't stress enough that we have to have somebody, down to these meetings other than the directors at the other end. But we need somebody to go to the meetings to start, saying that this is what we want and not let somebody else get it. Because there are people out there, barracudas out there, cities that will snap it up.
All right.
That's it?
Economic Development and Financing Corporation, EDFC.
Adrian already reported for us.
Okay. Mendocino Solid Waste Authority.
Solid Waste met on a week ago Thursday, May 4th, and went through quite a few things. One of them is, I think, lobbying that statewide, that pharmacies should have to handle all of the pharmaceutical waste, because the way it's handled now is ends up having to come from different funds, and it should be the pharmaceutical manufacturers should be responsible for their product. There had been an illegal dump cleanup in Ukiah at Airport Road. There's been a need for reestablishing a recycling buyback program in Gualala. The SWOW Solid Waste closed that facility with their agreement with the negotiations that we went through with the county. So now they're trying to get some kind of recycling buyback, and the 2 stores in town are they're stressed financially, so they can't handle it. They're also trying to open a Westport buyback station at least once a week. Louisa Morris is staying on as the general manager, which is great, and she also has just hired a new half-time office manager, who she's very thrilled with, and they have extended the date for a new technical staff person at the plant. So that position is still open if anyone is interested in working for MSWA.
All right. MTA.
Nothing to report.
All right. LAFCO, now I can report on that. Met on May 1st, Anderson Valley Community Services activation of latent powers, and the fire department is taking on the ambulance. They had, I believe, a nonprofit that was running the ambulance, and now it's going to come under the umbrella of the fire department. We had a public hearing on the Russian River Flood Control District MSR SOI update. We had a public hearing on the budget for 2017-2018. LAFCO looked at their legal services and reviewed their current attorney services, Scott Brown, and the vote was to stay with Mr. Brown, as he's kind of the expert in that field. I guess there was talk of maybe having county council do it, but, so that's all I have to report on LAFCO. And Finance Committee, we've got a potential meeting date though, right?
For budget workshop.
Oh, budget workshop, that's right. And Water and Wastewater Systems Committee has not met.
Not
Revive Ed, do you have anything more you wanted to add, Dusty?
No, we mainly discussed the civic types on board there.
Okay.
Signage overall.
All right, and Caltrans, we haven't had one. Cannabis, we've been going like gangbusters, seems like it. I kind of feel like we've got some good progress going there. And JPA feasibility study for WWTP, we haven't done that, and other committee reports, Museum Advisory Board.
The museum had a lot to say. We talked about how the Mendocino County Museum is a public-private partnership, and then how Willits is fortunate to have the museum in our community, that not every county has a museum. So at this last meeting, we talked about the three partners being the county, the Museum Advisory Board, and the Community Partner Group. And the museum is in need of funds, like they are every year, and so they're going to be relying heavily upon the partnership group. So they're going to come up with some creative ideas and how they can raise funds, and so stay tuned for more on how we can help out in our community. And then they have a opening reception for the Main Street Willits. It's on June 10th. I put the time in my phone, which I don't have with me, but there's a reception, and they're hoping that the City Council will be able to attend the opening reception for that.
Is that at the museum or here?
It's at the museum, and you'll have an opportunity to meet the curator and to learn more about the project. They went around to local businesses and just really sought people out in the community that had photographs and stories to tell, and so it should be a really good presentation. I'm looking forward to it.
It's on the 2nd?
It's on June 10th.
Which is a Saturday.
Yeah.
Are you going to publicize it or
Yeah, I'd be
in the
happy.
paper and stuff?
I'd be happy to put that out to the paper. Yeah, definitely. And then some things they have coming up are the Willits Car Show and on May 29th. And then there's been discussion about the relocation of a fire lookout tower from the fair, and they're going to be moving it to, talking about where it's going to go actually, with the city of Willits, where we might be able to put it.
Didn't know we had one of them.
Well, it's down at the fairgrounds.
It's at the fairgrounds in Ukiah.
Oh, in Ukiah.
Ukiah, but it would be moving to Willits, and there's discussion about where in Willits can we put the water tower. Watchtower.
Yeah.
We
Thank
put it
you.
in a roundabout if
It's late.
Council, all right, council member reports and recommendations. Do we have anything? All right, Madge, go ahead. I have one too, so.
Okay. Willits Economic Localization has been launching this 1,000 Sunflowers project, and one person's been growing a whole bunch of starts, and we've been giving them away at the farmer's market. And by the way, the farmer's market was the first time last week on Thursday, the first time at Rec Grove, and it was very well attended, and there were hundreds, no, maybe not quite hundreds of kids, but lots of families with all ages of kids, so it was really fun. This project is also getting some enthusiasm from volunteers, and one of the suggestions that has come up, in addition to working with the merchants and the Chamber of Commerce on pretty much all of Main Street, but somebody was suggesting some ways we could do landscaping, not with sunflowers probably, but with something like lavender and possibly rosemary, and longer-lived, more drought-tolerant plants that could be at the two interchanges. And so in addition to signage, we could have sort of an identity of a flower-friendly, pollinator-friendly community, and then building from that into having local beekeepers and bringing, kind of an identity that could grow around that theme of flowers. So we're pretty excited about that. And I think that was all. I might think of something else.
All right, I've got something, but if nobody else, do you have something?
Yeah. So this weekend is all about being healthy here in the Willits community, and so the Kids Club is having a Healthy Family Fair on this Friday from 3:30 to 7. It's taking place at the Buckle Grove Middle School. Everybody's welcome. And then on the following day, on Saturday, May 13th, there will be the 10,000 Steps Walk. It starts at JD Red House. Walk begins at 10 a.m. I'll be out there cheering for people as they progress along the steps, and hope that anybody else who might be interested. We were hoping that we might be able to talk to the police chief and see if there would be somebody that would be willing to either loan us or hold up a sign so that when we cross people across Highway 20, we could ensure their safety. So if you have any ideas, maybe we can talk. So looking forward to that. And you know that we're honoring Lynn Kenley, and we'll be giving out red carnations in her honor, and we're asking walkers to wear red in her honor. And then I'm really excited about the 3rd District Supervisor, Georgianne Krosky. I think that she really represents good family values, and so I'm really excited about having a supervisor. And then the last thing is immigration, and I heard that it may be on an upcoming agenda, which I'm excited about. I've been meeting with a community group called Community United and some members of Nuestra Alianza and another group, and they put together a resolution. I know there may be another resolution out there, I'm not sure. I did give a copy of the group's resolution to the city attorney to share with the city manager, so that we can see if there's anything in there that we should address and bring back to the group. And I look forward to it being on a future agenda.
I remembered another thing too. At the beginning of the month, we had the Women in Business meeting, and the presenters for that were the Caring Kitchen Project, and it's using the model of the Series project, which is around the country, but in particular, there's a real successful model in Sebastopol, and they're launching it in Mendocino County, but in Willits. That's going to be the first place that they do it, and it'll be using local food, nutritious organic food, and youth to prepare the meals, and then they're providing the meals to cancer patients, and and mostly at either free or whatever they can afford to contribute. So it has a number of spin-offs, which is including teaching the youth how to cook so that 25% of them don't eat at fast foods every day, which is apparently the current statistic, and also helping the community and helping our local farmers as well. So it's a win-win-win kind of program, and no, it was written up, but I think they're establishing this program in Willits is exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be located in the commercial kitchen behind Adam's Restaurant, right off the Main Street, so that's going to be exciting.
April Cunningham, Tina, Tyler O'Shea, the NCO people and the county are like, they're going to make this happen real, for real. It's not just an idea, it's going to happen. And if anyone's interested in Willits Economic Mobilization, I have the latest newsletter, which has a bunch of this kind of news in it. And anybody who wants to peruse that, it's available.
Anybody else? All right. Yeah, and Sabrina, thank you for meeting with those groups. I've been probably meeting with the same groups, it sounds like it. I have a follow-up meeting with another gentleman, probably somebody from the Citizens United, but I also met with our police chief because I thought anything that we throw out here coming from the council, it better be something the police department can support. Otherwise, I know how I would have felt as the police chief if I wasn't consulted. And myself and Scott went over at least what Brad went over and put forward. So, and I believe when I met with Nuestra Alianza, I told them that I had certain concerns and I wanted to make sure that we could live with it as a city and live with it with our police department. So I'm hoping to bring that at our next council meeting, so for your perusal. So that's all I have.
Good welfare?
Yep. Good welfare.
Well, okay. I have a good welfare. I have attained a personal landmark. I am now officially middle-aged. Isn't that what it means?
It's the new 60. Are you going to expound on this?
Really? Can we give him a 1 minute limit?
Be careful what you ask. Actually, public knowledge, everybody thinks I'm 45 years old. And this is going to come as a great shock, but I turned 80, which makes me middle-aged. And it was a wonderful day.
Because you're planning to live to 160.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to thank my colleagues for their nice card. And my wife did the number on last Thursday at home in the Rotary. It was a good day.
Good.
It was a good day. So, yeah, it's good to be alive.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
All right. That was really good and welcome. We have one closed session item, public employee performance evaluation, city manager. And we'll report out of that if there's something to report.